Good afternoon or good evening, actually. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of City of Glendale for March 21st, 2018. Ms. Stotler, roll call, please.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Manukian. Here. Commissioner Sartorian. Commissioner Shabazian. Chairman Astorian.
Here. Report regarding posting of agenda, ma'am.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, March 14th, 2018 on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Please rise. We will follow Commissioner Manukian for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of minutes. That's item number 4. For February 7th and March 7th. With one exception that on March 7th we had made some notations that as far as the historical survey was concerned, for that to be communicated with the affected properties or the property owners. I did not see that in the minutes, so it'll be good if we can add on to it. Is there any oral communication? Is there anybody here that doesn't want to speak about the Shoal Canyon biogeneration meeting? That is here just to address the commission for the heck of it? Seeing none, we will move on to zoning appeals. We have none. Is there any planning commission items, ma'am? None. There is no old business. So we will move to the new business, which is the Shoal Canyon landfill site, 3001 Shoal Canyon Road, proposed biogas renewable generation project, notice of intent to adopt a mitigated negative declaration, approval of conditional use permit and special recreation review application. Of course, the applicant is Glendale Water and Power, and the case planner is Mr. Dennis Joe. Mr. Joe, we will have you unspool this intricate tale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll approach the board to give my brief presentation. I'll just hand this card off to you first. The project before you is a power generation facility which is conditionally permitted in the SR zone and requires special consideration by the Planning Commission for its design and use. Just to go quickly into the site characteristics, it is located in the Shoal Canyon landfill facility, which is shown on this location map. The landfill is approximately 535 acre site. Within the landfill, there are active landfill, open space, and a recreational area, which is the Shoal Canyon Golf and Tennis Club. The project site, which on this location map is depicted in this, it's centrally located and depicted in a black box area you can see right here. And as you move over here for this aerial view, that black box you see over here that's centrally located is shown in this white area, which is blown up over here. This here is about a 2.2 acre site. In this area, which we call the project area, is it's a non-fill area of the landfill. It has previously graded flat areas and natural hillside slope areas. The flat areas, as of right now, it consists of trailers, storage containers, and does have an existing landfill gas processing facility. Right as of today and current, it collects, compresses, and processes the natural gas and sends that off to the Grayson Power Plant, which is approximately 5 miles to the west. As you can see, outside the white area is the sanitation district. It has storage containers, buildings, and a flaring station, which is not part of this project, but this is by the sanitation district, and no changes are proposed at the sanitation district's area, which is outside of the white area. The power generation will include 2 modular buildings, a 60,000 gallon fire water tank, over here a 10,000 gallon water tank, natural gas pipelines. As you can see here, it meanders outside the white area and connects to water line over here, and the natural gas line that goes towards to the west. Also, part of this project are 4 engine generator enclosures, also with 40-foot tall exhaust stacks, retaining walls, and a power distribution center and other associated equipment, which I can show later on in this section drawing over here. Just to give you a little brief overview of the proposed use in this power generation facility, the applicant is proposing to construct an on-site power plant at the location to use the occurring natural gas that's happening at the landfill site. It's utilizing the renewable energy to help the city meet its state-mandated renewable energy portfolio requirement, and also it would provide a beneficial use for using the natural gas. Because uncombusted methane gas is a potent greenhouse gas, there's only really 2 options on the site. It's either to flare it on site or use it as fuel for energy generation equipment. Continue just talking about the site. The surrounding zones of the Shoal Canyon are SR and ROS properties to the north. To the east is SR zones, which is open space. To the south is the city of LA, which is not zoned by the city of Glendale. And to the west is other R1R zone properties, ROS, and SR properties. Moving on to what's being constructed in this project. As you can see from the section here, and also with depicting as it goes across the site here, there's going to be, once again, as you can see from the section here, is a 60,000 gallon water tank at that's approximately 30 feet tall, a 23-foot tall retaining wall. Power generators and exhaust stacks, these will be about 40 feet tall, and a flare stack, which is approximately 40 feet tall as well. A line of sight analysis was provided with this application, as you can see on these exhibits here. Of this line of sight analysis, it's the line of sight of the 3 tallest structures, which are the water, fire water tank, the flare stack, and the exhaust stacks for the engine generator. Overall, what this line of sight analysis concludes is it's mostly going to be viewed from the interior and is going to be negligible from all other points, as you can see, points all the way 1 through 12 from the clockwise. You can see on this analysis. A security chain link fence will be provided around the perimeter of the site. Staff, as part of its conditions, has recommended that the slats, as you can see from these depictions here of what each of the equipments are going to look like, that the slats be removed so that the chain link fence can be seen through, and it can kind of blend into the natural setting from the outside. Onto the grading, approximately about 17,591 cubic yards are going to be grading. There's going to be no export. It's going to be balanced. So you can see in the brown area here is where the excavation is going to happen. The yellow portions here is where the fill is going to happen. And the excess excavation is going to be place other portions of the landfill. Just to give you a background of the existing residences around the site, to the west, in approximately 2,300 linear feet, which is the Glendale Canyon, the closest residence is about 2,300 linear feet from the equipment and storage areas. And to the north, this is a portion of the Chevy Chase Canyon area. It's about 3,500 linear feet away, and approximately 2,400 linear feet to the east is the city of Pasadena, and to the south, which is the city of Los Angeles, it's approximately 1,900 linear feet, which is across the open space and the 134, and that's where the closest residence will be. Outside of the project area, once again, there are going to be water lines and a gas line that will connect to Glendale Canyon here for the water line, and it's going to go connect towards the western portion of the site over here for the gas. Overall, staff's opinion is the project will not conflict or impede the normal development of the surrounding properties. Once again, the project will be entirely within the Shoal Canyon landfill area, and as configured, it's adequately set away from the surrounding uses. Just really last things to conclude. While the area is a high-fired area, it has very little wildfire potential. There's little or no native vegetation.
We have a long evening ahead of us, so I would appreciate it if we can help and hold your exuberance about what you're going to be hearing.
Well, continuing. Sure. I'll try to speak closer to these microphones. Okay. Part of the proposal, there will be a water line, once I said, with 2 fire hydrants, and also will connect to the 60,000-gallon water tank for fire suppression. Proper vegetation management procedures will also be provided as required by the Glendale Fire Prevention Bureau. Housing will not be impacted. No housing will be displaced, nor any being proposed for construction, so therefore additional recreational open spaces are not going to be needed. Last, as far as CEQA review, initial study and an M&D was prepared. It was circulated to the public for their review, and comments were received. Responses were posted on the web and also provided the commission for their review. The applicant's consultant is here available for any questions or further clarifications. Overall, based upon the staff report in my presentation and the M&D, staff feels it actually recommends to the commission to approve the subject CUP and SR review as well as adopt the M&D. This concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions? I'm available for you.
Thank you. Ms. Van Meiden, I think next is are we going to go to the applicant, or are they going to make a presentation? And who on the part of the applicant? Have you filled out a card?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Have you filled out a card? I have not. All right. So make sure that you do, but you do introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Yes, thank you very much.
And you have, by customary, 15 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you very much.
You don't have to take the entire 15 minutes. Right?
That was 15, right?
Right.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners, other city representatives, members of the public as well. My name is Michael Weber. I'm with Stantec Consulting Services, and I am the consultant environmental task manager for the project, responsible with the environmental team for preparing the permit applications and the initial study mitigated negative declaration that is being brought before the commission this evening. So we did want to spend just a few minutes giving you a little bit of additional background beyond what Mr. Joe had just presented. Thank you, sir. And do I have for slides is this guy? Okay, laser and arrows. Okay, thank you. So just a photograph of the existing site here. And as you notice, this is an active working maintenance and processing facility, as Mr. Joe had described, including much of that equipment remaining with the proposed project. As Mr. Joe also indicated, some of that will be replaced with some new equipment as well. But that's generally what the site looks like right now, and it's my understanding that it has looked like that for some time now. Another photograph of the existing facility, just viewing towards the southwest into Glendale and San Fernando Valley. And again, just gives another perspective on what the existing site looks like in its current condition today. Some additional background. In 1994, the dedication to the Shoal Canyon Landfill Gas Recovery Project was made that included installing gas processing equipment as well as the approximately 5-mile-long pipeline that is currently used to convey that landfill gas to the Grayson Power Plant, where it is currently blended with other natural gas so it can be combusted in the existing generation units or boilers at that site. So this project would be located at the existing processing and maintenance site, where the naturally occurring landfill gas would be extracted, conditioned, and combusted in reciprocating engines to produce approximately 12 megawatts of renewable electricity. Has a multitude of benefits, including using that naturally occurring landfill gas as a fuel source for green electricity, also effectively destroying harmful methane if it was not combusted, while using that energy to help meet the city in Glendale Water and Power, meet the California mandated renewable portfolio standard requirements in terms of the percentage of renewable energy sources that the city needs to fulfill in serving its electrical requirements. Use of the existing transmission system is a big plus. It goes right through the site, so in order to get that additional 12 megawatts of electricity into Glendale's electrical system, the lines are right there, we tie right into them. So the project does not require the construction or operation of any new electrical transmission lines as well. That will also allow the city to abandon that existing 5-mile long pipeline and really avoid long-term maintenance costs associated with continued use of that. Also do want to note that that pipeline does go through residential communities. It is completely installed within the public right-of-way, and there are homes in close proximity to that pipeline. So again, not to say that it is an unsafe pipeline by any means to operate, but again, with this project, we eliminate any potential risk of upset with that pipeline. And I think talking to Mr. Zurn and some other members of Glendale Water and Power, it's my understanding that the landfill gas pipeline has actually been hit twice with other construction-related projects. Really, this is a cleaner burning option at the landfill site compared to burning it or combusting it at Grayson in old and inefficient generation equipment. And it's also cleaner to burn it through the engines and generate electricity, because that's going to have some emission control systems on it compared to just burning it through the existing flare system at the landfill. And that will result in reducing air emissions at the Grayson power plant as well. So located at an existing Class 2 non-hazardous landfill, it's been accepting waste since the 1960s. That waste naturally decomposes and produces that landfill gas. So something has to be done with it, and the state mandates that it has to be combusted, whether that's flared or combusted in electrical generating equipment for beneficial use. That's what has to happen to it. Currently, it's collected at the central location within the landfill site, compressed, the liquids are removed, and again sent to the existing Grayson power plant through the underground pipeline, where it's again blended with natural gas at Grayson and combusted in the boiler units there to generate electricity. The Grayson power plant is proposed to be repowered, and those new electrical generation units that are being proposed at Grayson will not have the capability of burning the landfill gas. It really leaves the city and Glendale Water and Power with two options, and that is to dispose of the biogas by incinerating it in a flare, which is already permitted by the South Coast AQMD and acceptable, or utilizing it for a beneficial use, and that is exactly what is being proposed, to generate electricity of it, control the emissions more, and get more benefit rather than just simply flaring it. And it's really more environmentally efficient and cost effective to do it that way, and that is the preferred method. Just wanted to quickly note Glendale's power content label. What that means is, where is the existing electrical sources that the city is using coming from? And you can see on the left here, me if I'm laser, 47% of the electricity consumed in Glendale, and this is for 2016, the most current year that we have on record, is 47% of all of the electricity supplied by Glendale Water and Power to the customers in the city of Glendale. 47% of that came from renewable energy sources, and those are eligible renewable energy sources. If you look at the carbon-free power content, it's even higher. But if you compare that to California, on average as a whole, the state's only at 25%. So Glendale is already almost double what the entire state of California is doing for renewable energy portfolio standard eligibility and requirements. Again, the landfill gas is a source of renewable energy if we use it for that. And 100% of the electricity generated from the proposed biogas renewable generation project will count towards that renewable portfolio standard eligibility. Right now, because it's blended substantially with natural gas to get it to burn or be combusted at the Grayson units, this is actually going to increase it. So we only get 50% credit when it's burned at Grayson, because we're blending it with natural gas so much, so we don't get the full credit. So that'll change. We got 100% of it, and Glendale Water and Power is expecting that to increase the renewable power content by 6 to 8% alone, just from this project. And again, we will be getting 100% renewable energy credits from that. Before I end, I want to talk very briefly about the California Environmental Quality Act process and how we've gotten to where we are today. We have received a number of comments indicating that a mitigated negative declaration was an inappropriate type of CEQA document for this project, and that it should be an environmental impact report. In addition to that, we've received comments from the public believing that not only should this project be an EIR, one EIR should be prepared that evaluates this project as well as the Grayson Repowering project as one project. We do not believe that that is the case, and wanted to just briefly explain how we went through that process to determine a mitigated negative declaration is appropriate and why this is a separate project from Grayson Repowering. So the first step we do is we prepare an initial study. What we do is we look at all of the environmental factors that are required to be evaluated under the California Environmental Quality Act. There's about 19 or 20 of those different categories: aesthetics, air quality, biological resources. I won't name them all. That analysis is not constrained by jurisdictional boundaries whatsoever. We did not just stop that analysis at the boundaries of the city, and we did evaluate, consider, and analyze potential impacts to surrounding communities, including Eagle Rock. The initial study and supporting technical studies concluded that there would be either no impact or less than significant impacts in every environmental factor with the exception of biological resources, which determined to be potentially significant. However, we were able to apply, I think it was 4 different mitigation measures to biological resources to reduce the potential significance of those impacts to less than significant. And that comprehensive analysis really demonstrates that we do not have any substantial environmental effects of this project that would be required to be evaluated under an environmental impact report. I also want to note that we did address cumulative impacts as part of the mitigated negative declaration as well. And part of the projects that were considered included the Grayson Repowering project, the landfill expansion project, as well as the green waste anaerobic digester projects. We looked at all of those projects combined and what potential impacts those could have as well. And again, concluded those impacts would be less than significant. That led us into proceeding with preparation of a mitigated negative declaration, as well as a really lengthy public environmental review period for this document. We are required by CEQA to have a minimum 20-day public review period for mitigated negative declarations. When the city released that for public review, we selected a 30-day public review period, and based on comments received and interest from community members as well as others, the city extended the public review period twice, and we ended at a total of 82 days of public review period. So over 4 times what is the minimum required under the California Environmental Quality Act. Under a mitigated negative declaration, the city is not required by CEQA to respond to comments received during that public review. We are just required to consider those in the decision-making process. However, the city went above and beyond that requirement, and we did respond to comments that were received from the public, even though we did not have to. So I think that shows the level of effort that the city, as its responsibility as a CEQA lead agency, went to consider the public comment period as well as the comments received to the public, and really trying to provide clarification on the environmental impacts and the approach that we took, which again is consistent with what is required by the California Environmental Quality Act. In terms of the proposed biogas project's relationship to the Grayson Repowering project and why those are separate, the biogas project, it's just a separate project, and it has independent utility from the Grayson Repowering project or any other project. The biogas project is not part of, it's not the same as, or a direct or reasonably foreseeable consequence of the Grayson Repowering project. The Shoal Canyon facility has an existing South Coast Air Quality Management District that permits flaring that landfill gas at the site already. That project and its inception did go through California Environmental Quality Act review as well as a separate project before, and that was a mitigated negative declaration. Regardless of whether the Grayson Repowering project moves forward or not, the biogas project is independently viable and can be developed. And it is not in any way dependent on approval or implementation of the Grayson Repowering Project. So thank you. That concludes my presentation, and the project proponent team would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions for the gentleman?
I just have one question.
Please do.
For clarification, you mentioned that current setup is that this biogas is being fed to a Grayson power plant and mixed with the natural gas 50-50. And I think in your presentation you mentioned that this biogas will be 100% feeding and no gas will be added. Is that correct?
There would be a little bit of gas added just to get the reciprocating engines to start up. That landfill gas is not rich enough to get those engines to start on their own. So that's the idea, as Mr. Joe described, that little natural gas line extension would be used to get those engines to start. After that, they can just be self-sustained on the landfill gas. It's my understanding that there is a requirement that the state has that you cannot blend that landfill gas with more than 10% of natural gas to be able to get that credit. And at the Grayson the Grayson power plant, those existing units just cannot burn that landfill gas without being blended with the natural gas more.
I have one more question. I don't know if you have the answer for this, and I don't know if you looked at this. You told me that there's existing a 5-mile line that's already existing that is still in good condition. Have you looked at maybe placing this equipment within the boundary of Grayson Power Plant?
Yeah. Steve, you want to try to answer that question if you don't mind?
Steve Zurn, General Manager of Glendale Water and Power. We certainly did look at that. And there's a couple things that came into play. One is the air quality permit. So by putting them down there, I think it might be the microphone, but let me yell a little bit. So one of the issues has to do with the permitting of the air quality district. You have them on the same site, so that becomes an issue. And in our discussions with the AQMD, this was the preferred method when we got finished discussing with them. Also, there's a footprint issue. You know, I think there's a perception that somehow the UOC, as we call it, the Utility Operating Center, is some giant piece of land that has a lot of available space, when in fact it is not the case. And the power plant part of the facility is only about half, a little less than half. The rest of the facility is a working water and electric maintenance operation, facilities maintenance, warehousing, quarters for the staff. So that's not even something we could consider on that part. So you're only talking about half of the existing site. And to be honest with you, when we looked at the configuration, even with new equipment at Grayson, and having to maintain fire lanes and adequate access, because you can imagine this is very big equipment. So you have to have be able to have lanes for fire apparatus to get in and fight fires in the event of an emergency, or to move the equipment. And there's just no room. There just absolutely isn't a room. And again, in discussions with the AQMD, their preference was you do it at the site. That's what they want to do, because that's where the flares are. And at the end of the day, that's where the gas will go. In this particular case, what we're offering is a proposed project that will take that gas and create renewable energy.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a quick question.
Your microphone.
Quick question regarding fire suppression and risks associated with fires. When we received the presentation, we were told that the risks were minimal. Simultaneously, we were told that there's a 60,000 gallon tank up there next to a 10,000. So could you reconcile those two?
Sure. Yeah.
Facts? Thank you.
The project site is within a designated high fire hazard zone. It is. And as I think Mr. Joe had noted before, it is an active landfill as well. So there's not a lot of fuel per se in the active landfill side of things. But on the boundaries, there is some vegetation that should there be some sort of spark, there could be a fire. So in terms of the 60,000 gallon water tank for fire suppression, that is to meet code requirements. So this facility does have to meet the City of Glendale's fire code, and including fire protection. So that's the design basis for fighting fires that's required by the code. That plan has been reviewed and approved by Glendale's Fire Department as well. And in terms of the fire hazard, I think it's very important not only just to talk about a potential maybe lack of source as well as the fire suppression, but the sources of ignition from our specific project. The flares are existing there. That is not a new ignition source. There's no storage of landfill gas or natural gas that could combust or explode. The landfill gas itself barely burns. So the risk of something happening in terms of a large fire explosion from the landfill gas is quite low. When we also look at the pressures that we're talking about, those pressures of the landfill gas are also quite low. If you look at the pressure of the landfill gas in the existing pipeline that is used to convey it to Grayson, I believe that's about 50 PSI, pounds per square inch. Everything that we're talking about in terms of the proposed biogas renewable generation project, all the little vessels that the gas will go through for the cleaning portion, is literally like 10 PSI. So the pressures are substantially low, as well as I believe the state of California requires some of these vessels that contain these types of materials to be designed and code stamped to meet certain requirements. Our levels of pressure that are associated with those are below those requirements. However, the city has elected to use those types of vessels that meet those standards and codes, even though we're not talking about pressures associated with those. So when you look at all those things combined, we just don't see the project substantially increasing any fire hazard beyond what's really already there.
Let me just add to that what Mike has said, and that is, you know, we didn't think the issue of fire was funny. We don't think it's funny at all. And in fact, once there's thorough examination was done by the Fire Prevention Bureau, as they would go through any project, and this one had some special and unique qualities. When they were done, I sat down with Chief Fish and went through it methodically. And the questions I asked: do you have an issue with brush fire hazard? No. Do you? I mean, even down to some of the equipment devices to extinguish that, he said, comes down to, do you want to save your equipment, or are you okay if your equipment ends up getting damaged in this thing? So that's some leeway we had there too. But we took this very seriously. And so when his staff was done, we took it back to him. So I sat down one-on-one with him, and we went through everything methodically to make sure that there were no concerns on his part.
Any other questions on part of the commissioners? I have several from the both of you or any one of you. When is Shoal Canyon slated for closing?
Mr. President, as of today, and I may be telling you something you already know, it doesn't have a specific date. It has to do with tonnage deposits. So you have a certain amount of tonnage deposits. And as you can imagine, those ebb and flow, quite frankly, with the economy. So they dropped to all-time lows during the most recent Great Recession, and they have picked back up. But just based on projecting that out, you're looking at about 2030 under the existing permit. That's 2030.
2030.
Correct. But let me, if I can, elaborate a little bit on that. That's disposing of garbage in the landfill. The gas will go on and go on. It will go 50 to 70 years, and that's just an estimate. In 1975, we closed the inactive site and built the golf course. That's the recreation area Mr. Joe spoke of. That's active landfill. It's closed in 1975. Still produces gas today. It's interconnected to the main system, and it still produces gas. Obviously, that gas curve begins to degrade over time, but I can tell you that we will be responsible for managing that gas in perpetuity. So even if we stopped putting garbage in today, we still have a gas issue that we'll have to deal with. We have no choice about that.
Got it. So the Biogen project is not going to increase the rate of collection, is it?
The rate of collection of gas?
No, trash.
No. It's not connected to an expansion. It's not connected to the refuse hauling operation. It's not connected to any of those. It is simply a process to, first and foremost, collect the gas as is what is environmentally required and responsible on our part But instead of flaring it, combusting it, burning it to burn off the methane, we are going to put that to beneficial use by creating green electricity, 100% green electricity. So this is not going to dictate at all whether more trash goes in the landfill, whether it eventually gets expanded, doesn't get expanded, closes, any of those things.
Okay. And so you've done cost-benefit analysis and economic analysis on this project.
Yes, sir.
How much is the cost? I mean, how is it being paid, and so forth?
So the estimate we have now is between 30 and 35 million for the construction and the equipment. And we anticipate paying that without, we had originally looked at possibly rolling this into a combined bond measure with other projects, but we will pay for that out of our reserves. And then it's a 12 megawatt project, and based on the electricity generated, our ROI, our return on investment, is less than 7 years. Less than 7 years.
Less than 7 years. The biogen, the generators will generate 12 megawatts of power.
Combined, correct.
And give me a time period. Is that per month? Is it per year?
It's every day.
It's every day.
Every day.
That it generates.
That's 12 megawatt hours. Sure we go.
Yeah, you need to come to the and introduce yourself.
And my name is Carl Hossey. I'm the project manager on behalf of Stantec. So there's actually 4 generating units. I mean, engines, reciprocating engines. Reciprocating engine is just like a big diesel or car engine, just big, okay? They will generate roughly 3 megawatts capacity of electricity, each one of them, okay? It'll depend upon how much gas is available. They won't continue to generate 12 megawatts forever, because as the gas curve drops, they will actually reduce some in that. But when we say that's a capacity, if you're talking about what it produces on an annual basis, it'll produce 12 megawatts per hour for an entire year. These units will run consistently and continuously. They do not go on and off, other than maintenance, okay? And they're like a car. They need an oil change and spark plugs changes and what have you. So, but other than that, they're continuous in producing.
And when we do the maintenance, we rotate those, because as you can imagine, the gas never stops. So we'd prefer not to flare it in between while we're doing maintenance. So we set up a system where we can continuously burn that. And there is no day and night with this type of fuel. So we will be producing it at some level. But as Carl said, and as I said, when the landfill does close, you will see the gas curve begin to drop, probably somewhere, we anticipate the 20-25 year range. That's conservative, but that it doesn't go away. It just, the amount goes down. But we will be generating that, as we will be using as much of that electricity as we possibly can, for the reasons that you saw up there on our power content label, and the desire on our part as a utility to have the greenest power we possibly can, and also to meet the state mandate.
Right.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
These engines are going on 24/7. What about the noise?
Yeah, the noise would also occur around the clock,
Okay,
24 hours a
and-
day, during daytime and during nighttime. And if I may elaborate on that, that was analyzed within the noise section of the mitigated negative declaration. We did a noise technical study, some very sophisticated computer modeling of noise levels that would occur from the project at nearby sensitive receptors. And we selected generally the nearest residences in every direction from the project. We collected existing ambient noise levels at each one of those receptors, and in accordance with the City of Glendale's noise ordinance, we modeled that noise and were able to show that in all cases, whether it's day or nighttime, the increase in ambient noise levels would be below what the city considers a violation of the noise ordinance. That violation is considered a 5 decibel increase. And forgive me, I don't have the data right in front of me. My recollection was in the daytime at one receptor, the maximum increase was about 2.2 decibels. And at nighttime, it would be a 1.5 decibel increase, approximately. So we're not even close to halfway to meeting that threshold with noise impacts.
Okay. Another question, Mr. Chairman?
Please, of course.
The construction of the site, we were told that the dirt that was going to be moved, it was going to balance itself out, and some of it was going to be stored on site. After all, we're going to need this to cover whatever incoming trash we have. So, beside that, in terms of the construction, how much traffic do you foresee going through the streets that lead to the landfill area?
During construction or operation, or both? Both?
Yes.
Okay. Construction, our maximum peak would be 23 vehicle trips per day that would be accessing the landfill site up through, I think it's Figueroa there. During operation, it would be limited to 6 vehicle trips per day, which is not dissimilar to what occurs there already for operating the facility as it is right now.
Today.
Correct.
That would, excuse me,
Yes.
that would be the maintenance primarily. And just to go back to your other question, keep in mind, as the pictures we showed you, there is an active processing operation today that does also have noise, and it does also have maintenance on a regular basis. So those 6 trips that Mike spoke of are happening today because we maintain the existing infrastructure.
Is it the 6 or 23, Mike, that is
That's for
happening today?
construction. 23 during
Is
the
for the
actual
construction.
construction. 6 on a regular basis.
That's the 18-month period.
That's correct. That is the maximum. In many cases, it will be below that. But if you were going to look at the worst day and you wanted to project that through the entire construction period, 23 vehicle trips per day.
And when we talk about vehicles, are we talking pickup trucks or are we talking dump trucks?
We are talking no dump trucks. There will be some trucks delivering supplies, the major equipment that's needed to get up there. So it will be a variety of passenger cars, pickup trucks, and larger trucks. I would note that we did consider that as part of the traffic analysis in the mitigated negative declaration. We did a technical traffic study that is an appendix to that final mitigated negative declaration that included evaluating all of the potential intersections that could be affected during construction and operation of the project. That was vetted through City of Glendale's Public Works Department, the Traffic Division, who had provided some comments but agreed with the scope and approved the scope of the traffic study. That included doing vehicle counts at all those existing intersections that could be affected so we could understand the current level of service of those potentially affected intersections. And as part of our traffic study, we quantitatively considered or analyzed what the addition of the project, particularly the construction traffic, would do to the existing levels of service, and through that study concluded that there would have less than significant impacts on any of those intersections. It would not violate any established level of circulation standard that the city has.
So 23 general purpose vehicles for 18 months of construction, and thereafter 6 general purpose vehicles.
Yeah, and thank you for kind of reminding me, because I forgot to add the last part of that. What we do in those traffic analysis is we use a term called passenger car equivalencies. What that notes is that a large truck, a big rig truck, has a higher potential to degrade circulation and traffic compared to a smaller passenger car. They're a little bit more quicker and nimble. So what that does is we actually look at the number of axles and the weights of each one of the vehicles that is being proposed, and that's the engineering team and construction team helped us figure out what that mix would be, and we actually penalize some of the larger vehicles. So for the general passenger cars, that counts as 1. Those kind of mid-range, that counts as, say, 1.5 or 2 passenger car equivalencies. The bigger trucks count as 3. So when we say 23 vehicle trips, that includes some passenger cars, that includes that mid kind of, and it includes some heavy trucks. But when we do the traffic analysis, we do the passenger car equivalencies that may calculate out to something, say, 50 passenger car equivalents, and that's the number that we use for the traffic impact analysis. So it's a conservative approach to make sure that we're not forgetting about the potential impacts from those larger vehicles.
And Mr. Mnookin, if I can add, keeping in mind this is an active landfill, you asked a question about size. I can with a great deal of confidence tell you it won't be anything bigger that's already going up there on a daily basis. So,
in regards to AQMD, and either one of you, this is a question for either one of you. AQMD has to issue a permit for construction and operation. At what time would that permit, should the city decide to go ahead with this project? At what time would that permit be issued?
Coral, would you mind addressing that one? Because I think you're more familiar with the timing because you've been working on the permit packages.
Hi, I'm Carl Laney with Montrose Air Quality Services. We are coordinating the permitting with the South Coast AQMD. They do have the applications in hand right now. They have started to draft the permit. They've gone through and validated our review on the regulatory analysis, the emissions inventory. They're wrapping up their final review on all of our technical analyses, including our dispersion model, our regional air quality analysis, and our health risk assessments. They're hoping to have that finished in the next couple of weeks. But the engineering department at the district is proceeding with putting together draft language on the permit. So we would hope we could have a draft permit ready for EPA review in another month or so.
And I'll tell you why I'm asking this question, because in your mitigated negative declaration document, there was a statement that prior to initiating the analysis, the city submitted analysis and this is what you are referring to, a protocol to SCAQMD for their approval. And the statement is that AQMD has approved your analysis.
AQMD has approved the protocol. So when we do an air quality analysis and a health risk assessment, we basically meet with the district in advance to go through the details of the analysis. We put together a formal protocol for them to review to ensure that it's technically correct, scientifically correct, and regulatorily correct. They have approved that process for conducting the analysis, and the analysis was done in accordance with that protocol. During the analysis itself, we also were in communication with the district when we needed to fine-tune things and things like that. The protocol, or excuse me, the analysis itself is then submitted to the district with the application. They are looking at the final results of the analysis, and we will have their conclusions shortly on the final results. But I will tell you, the analysis was done strictly in accordance with the protocol that they agreed to, in accordance with their typical policies, in accordance with EPA regulations, and based upon our historic processes for conducting these analysis, I would not expect any opposition to the results from the Air District or changes to our conclusions.
So in other words, if the protocol has been approved, subject to your final analysis, it becomes a preordained process, is what you're telling me?
Nothing is preordained. We have
so there is a chance that they will they may reject it, correct?
I have been doing this for 20-some years, and we have never had our analyses rejected by any regulatory agency. The people we assign to do our analyses are trained, recognized experts in the field.
So then it's almost 100% chance that you're going to get the AQMD permits for construction.
I have every expectation of receiving the permit as designed in our application.
So let me, while I have you here, you said Montrose Air Services modeling. There were some comments, and they were responded to the MND, but as well as when I was watching the council meetings, that some of the receptors, there were at least a confusion about receptors being used in San Gabriel Valley and that it's too far away and so forth. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
I don't believe the issue was receptors. Our highest concentrations are actually at the fence line of the landfill. I believe what you're referring to were concerns about the air quality monitoring data and the stations where air quality is monitored in the South Coast.
I'm sorry, maybe I misstated. The nearest source receptor area, the SRA, was St. Gabriel, and there was some consternation why we haven't used anything closer.
We are using the closest air quality monitoring stations to the facility that monitor the pollutants that we provide our analysis on. Again, there are 35 monitoring networks in the South Coast Basin. The district has defined where those stations are. They sincerely do try to make sure that they are monitoring the worst air quality in those neighborhoods or in those regions, and they expect that those are representative of where the project itself is. And again, I believe they were the very closest stations to the facility. Not every station monitors every pollutant. For example, particulate matter, because of our attainment status, is monitored at many of those 35 stations in the district. Sulfur oxides, however, we don't have a regional problem with sulfur oxides emissions, so there are fewer stations. So in that case, we have to go a little bit farther out to find the results. But South Coast Sulfur Station would be where they would expect the worst concentrations of sulfur oxides, near the refineries, near freeways, that sort of thing.
So the bottom line is that you do not choose where this monitoring station is. You have to use the ones that are available to you that are closest to the project in question.
It is part of the protocol with the district. The district actually told us which stations to use.
Thank you.
We're going to keep this open because we may come up with other questions, so thank you.
Thank you.
So far.
Mr. Chair, I just want to announce that the MND, the draft MND, the comments received by staff from the public for the MND, and responses to the comments received are available at the table by the staff reports where the public has entered, and also was provided to the Planning Commission. Also at the dais before the meeting, staff did receive additional comments, which is also printed and provided to you. And there's particularly one a comment to the MND that was received by Collaborative Eagle Rock Beautiful, which goes by SERB. They provided the response to comment, and also I provided staff's response to that. What happened as far as it was not posted, as far as staff's review or response, this letter was emailed to the City Council and Glendale Water and Powers Commission. Unfortunately, it never made it to planning staff for us to respond. After the response for comments were received, SERB did reach out to me and asked why this was not responded to. So we had drafted a response to their comments, which is provided to you at the dais, and a copy is also available at the front as well. So I just kind of wanted to announce and kind of reiterate where these documents can be found, and it's available for public reviews in this room as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. Before I go to public and hear what folks have to say, Ms. Van Meiden, this generated some consternation, and the applicant tried to, and the vendor tried to give some sort of an answer for it. I think this is where we need your expertise, so you can tell us a little bit about this fair argument legal standard, and how the MND and versus the EIR, and I think that is important, so I can get that out of at least my head, basically.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, there is a different standard of legal review between a mitigated negative declaration or a negative declaration and an environmental impact report, which is a more comprehensive environmental review. The standard of review for a mitigated negative declaration is called the fair argument standard, and essentially what that means is that if there is evidence that there may be a significant impact from a project, then a project should consider doing an EIR. Okay, if there may be a significant impact. With respect to an EIR, that's a substantial evidence standard, and that is fact-based on evidence that's placed in the record, expert opinion that's supported by facts, reasonable inferences based on facts. And substantial evidence is also necessary to support the conclusions, obviously, that are within a mitigating negative declaration. You just cannot set forth conclusions. So part of the basis of the analysis, well, all of the analysis needs to be supported by evidence in the record and through studies such as those described by Mr. Laney and by Mr. Weber, the studies that were conducted on the various categories. So those have to be supported by substantial evidence, facts, expert opinion, such as Mr. Laney's, and that is what is required for purposes of supporting a negative declaration or a mitigated negative declaration. Hopefully that helps to
It does.
explain
very much.
the distinction between the two.
It does. Any questions for staff from the commissioners? All right, so we will go to the speaking part of portion of our meeting. We will be able to afford you each 3 minutes. Now, if you have to take a little bit longer, it's not going to really, knock off anything off my shoulders. But having said that, you don't. If you hear something that is your point of view has been said, just be frugal with time, not with your thoughts, but with your time. Let's start with Mr. Hans Johnson.
Hello, Commission, and hello, fellow Glendalers, Eagle Rockers, and Angelinos. I am here not representing the 850 members of the East Area Progressive Democrats who join in our opposition to the expansion of the dump and to the placement of the biogas plant at the dump site, but as a representative and convener of Communities United to Stop the Shoal Dump Expansion. Tomorrow is the 57th anniversary of the opening of the Shoal Dump. What a dubious way of celebrating this birthday in the discussion of locating a gas plant in an area of known high fire risk to further compound the injustice of the placement of the dump there in a historic canyon at the north end of Figueroa Street. Our coalition, which spans the jurisdictions of Glendale and Los Angeles and Pasadena, reflected here tonight and in 4 years of advocacy to stop the dump expansion, joins in opposing the location of a dump gas plant for a variety of reasons. First, there is a demonstrated fire risk in the area, and compounding it by the placement of a gas plant in an area of known fire risk when other options are available is not advisable. Number two, we understand the importance of burning the methane, but understand also that Glendale, having passed a zero waste resolution in December of 2011, unanimously has moved in the direction of trying to mitigate its effects of energy generation on the environment and recognize that there are other options available than burning off the gas at the site of the dump. Third, I think it is plain from the level of opposition and the level of concern raised by a broad array of community stakeholders that there are problems of trust in how this proposal has moved forward and how it is being piecemealed in the planning process and selectively done in aggregate with the Grayson proposal when convenient and selectively separated from the Grayson proposal when convenient also. That represents a continuity of the breach of trust that has been apparent from the beginning when Glendale's first proposal for expanding of the dump by 180 feet or 17 more stories of trash was put forward in March of 2014. Communities United stands before you and sits before you tonight in unanimous opposition to this proposal and urges your strong efforts to consider other placements, other contingencies for dealing with the methane gas from the dump site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Let's keep, again, our exuberances to ourselves because we want to go ahead as quickly as we can. Jackie Echo, am I pronouncing it properly? I didn't butcher your name, I hope.
That's fine, Jackie Eco.
Eco,
That's
okay.
fine. Just basically, I think it's really important to explore alternate options. It's very important. Of course, it's just a very big concern. The danger of fires are out of control, and they're not expected to get any better for California, Southern California, with the droughts and climate change. The fires, I think we can all agree, are getting worse and worse and very frightening and very, very hard to control and stop from potentially a very disastrous explosion. And it's very, very concerning. And I think we can have faith in our local government to really explore every single option so that we can avoid this expansion and instead move to clean solar alternatives, and possibly solar water heaters can be explored a little bit more, as well as other solar alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Bert Culver?
I think you might be calling names out of order. I was one of the last people to show up.
I didn't put this in order. I was handed.
Anyway,
So
happy
if
to
you don't
speak
want
now.
to speak, I can hold on and you can talk later.
I'll talk now. I'm here.
To me, it doesn't make any difference, sir.
Thank you. Well, I just want to address the idea that the two projects, Grayson and the biogas plant, are related, and they should be considered related. They should be considered on the same EIR, because if you build the biogas plant first before Grayson, then the baseline levels of the gas, of pollutions out of Grayson, drop considerably, and you'd have much more to mitigate when you go to rebuild Grayson. That's why they're doing these at the same time. Now, if you didn't have this project and you were tearing down Grayson, suddenly you'd have to deal with the gas. What happens to the gas? What's the logical consequence of that gas? Well, it's going to be flared because we don't have anything to do with it. So that would be a detriment to the Grayson approval process. So these two projects are closely related, and they can't be separated, and they can't be done out of order. But they've conveniently done them at the same time so that they can squeak them through and call them not related, but clearly they are. They're not considering having an EIR for the biogas project would force them or encourage them to look at other options. One option would be to burn them in the new plant. If they build a new plant, maybe they could do 95% natural gas, 5% biogas. Was that explored? Don't know. They could liquefy the gas and then put it in the natural gas burning buses here in Glendale. That wasn't explored. I don't know. I'm no expert on it. I just know a few different ways that they could have done differently that they haven't explored. And because they didn't do an EIR, they didn't explore them. So they're telling you, well, we have to do this. We have to burn this gas. Well, that's not true. They have to do something with the gas, but it could be something with much less environmental impact. Now, I'll defer to other people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mitch Koss?
I'm going to read some additional questions from Justin King, a hydrology engineer.
Please speak up.
I guess I can try. The MND does not adequately address mitigations and backup or fail-safe systems. The following questions remain. Would the 3,500-foot natural gas line be double-walled? How will it be secured above ground? What types of alarms would be installed to notify of a leak?
Can you go a little bit slower so they can take...
Is a real-time telemetry warning system being utilized by the project? How will the aqueous ammonia be stored? What type of secondary containment will be used to prevent the spill of aqueous ammonia? The MND only generally addresses how current hazardous materials and spills are handled, but it is not specific about potential problems with the new gas processing equipment. Is there a site spill contingency plan for construction, operation, and maintenance of the plant? What chemical is the carbon monoxide catalyst? Is it hazardous, and where will it be stored? What volume of impurities from condensate is estimated to be stored on the site at one time? Where will the impurities be stored? Is there secondary containment associated with the storage tank? Have the impacts to the existing groundwater well in Glen Oaks Canyon downgrade from the existing landfill been assessed? Would you like to have a copy of it?
Sure, you can have Ms. Stotler take it, and we'll make it part of the record. Thank you.
If I could just add
Go ahead.
one thing. I'm not an engineer, and I just read that. But I read the newspapers, and...
So you were double dipping. This was for somebody else.
Yes, it was. I'm just a neighbor. But, you know, in California, burning carbon is not considered green. Like, if you've been looking at the laws we're passing lately, we're going for renewables. In fact, we're trying to push to have 100% renewable energy, electrical energy by, like, 2030. I mean, this is not green, if you ask our legislature or our governor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That equipment. Yeah. If you could pick it up so we don't, yeah.
All right, so Martins Ayatiwa.
Thank you.
It's Ayatiwa.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my name is Martin Ayetiwa. I'm a senior civil engineer with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works. I'm here to read a statement for the record on behalf of the county regarding the project. Public Works provides engineering advice to the county on matters related to joint powers agreement between the city of Glendale, the county, and the County Sanitation District number 2 for the operation of the SCHOLL Canyon landfill. First, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works appreciates the opportunity to comment on the mitigated negative declaration for the project. As you might be aware, on November 9, the department provided comments on the draft mitigated declaration, and that was released on August 21, 2017. One of the comments that was provided was with regards to the transportation and traffic. We stated that, I'm going to quote it for the record. Per the City of Glendale's website, there are 3 currently proposed projects at the landfill: the SCHOLL Canyon Landfill Expansion Project, the BIOGAS Renewable Project, and the Anaerobic Digestion Facility Project. These projects will utilize the same hauling routes, access roads, and feeder roads, and will potentially be operating at the same time. The draft initial study and mitigated negative deck does not discuss or analyze the combined impacts of these projects on the traffic patterns at the entrance and adjacent surrounding communities. So based on our review of the final mitigated document that was released, we believe that the county's comments were not addressed. And that concludes my statement. And I would like to introduce, I have a copy that I would like to submit for the record.
Please hand it to Ms. Stotler. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Joanne Morris.
Good evening. Many of us here tonight believe the biogas project's mitigated negative declaration, negative DEC, report is insufficient, and the project should have an environmental impact report. Instead, we will be supporting our position with several points, which I will now summarize. Point number 1, the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA website, includes a list of projects that require a mandatory EIR, and the biogas project does indeed meet this criteria, which is the project is a new construction on a landfill and involves the burning of municipal waste. There is an exception when methane is burned exclusively. However, for the biogas project, methane will be mixed with 10% natural gas. To elaborate a bit, the proposed biogas project would include a pipeline to deliver natural gas to the power plant, where this natural gas would be mixed with landfill gas to fuel the generators. Therefore, the exception to the mandatory EIR is not met. A mandatory EIR is legally required. 2, the biogas project is clearly linked to Grayson Repowering Project as well as the Shoal Canyon landfill itself, yet it is presented in a negative deck as if it were an isolated project in and of itself. CEQA requires that environmental review documents analyze the whole of an action and not split projects into separate pieces as has been done in the negative deck. An EIR is required. Number 3, there are inherent dangers present in the landfill itself that are a cause for great concern. The fact that it is located near earthquake faults, the fact that it is located in a high fire zone, the fact that it is located near many sensitive receptors, and that the landfill has no lining and sits on fractured porous granite. These issues have never been adequately addressed, as the original EIR for the landfill was never finalized. This is another reason why the negative deck is inadequate. Finally, a negative deck does not discuss alternative projects as would an EIR. Excellent alternatives will be discussed tonight. The biogas project legally warrants that an EIR be conducted, and it should be conducted by an agency with no vested interest in the project. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Marie, I guess I'm going to keep asking no applause, right? Yeah, but go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
There was a comment made. No, it's okay. I'm sorry. There was a comment made by the speaker relating to the EIR being mandatory and so on. Can you comment on that? Or
Well, EIR is only required when there is significant or unavoidable impacts are found by initial study. By the draft M&D, it found that through mitigation measures, it was able to reduce the significant impacts to less than significant.
what the speaker stated sort of takes this out of, sort of makes it objective. If it's a new construction on a landfill and there's going to be gas burn off, you do an EIR. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, if I could refer specifically to the section that the speaker was making reference to, and that's Public Resources Code Section 21151.1. It's entitled Waste Burning Activities Exemptions. An EIR is required for those types of activities, but there are exceptions to that. And the exception to that is for a project that burns methane gas produced from a disposal site as defined by another section of the code, which this site qualifies for, that is used only for the disposal of solid waste, which this site is used for. As you may recall, Mike Weber indicated that it is acceptable to spark the engine in order to start those reciprocating engines with natural gas in order to burn that landfill gas, because it will not ignite in and of itself. And my understanding is from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and I think perhaps I could be updated or corrected on that, that it is not a violation of this section to allow for that up to 10%. It's not being mixed like it is at Grayson, but it's for purposes of commencing the ignition of the reciprocating engines. And at that point forward, it exclusively burns the landfill gas. So it does fall into the exception, and that, again, is Public Resources Code Section 21151.1 sub D2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Marie Freeman.
Excuse me for standing too soon, and good evening. I'm a resident of Glendale many years and live fairly near the landfill. The proposed power plant is not a new alternative, proactive alternative for greener energy. Glendale has been utilizing landfill gas to generate electricity for many years, and now it is time to renovate the equipment. However, the MND for the project has not made a convincing argument that moving the operation to Shoal Canyon provides more benefits than it presents new environmental challenges. The move seems more reactive than proactive. Shoal Canyon is a highly unusual site, regional facility with local and county-wide connections. Therefore, the proposed power plant is a tool in a much larger operation of waste management and energy production. So we need to keep that bigger picture in mind. The expansion project, anaerobic digester, Grayson repowering, and this landfill plant are linked, and not just to one another, but in many ways also to other cities, in the waste shed, and to the county. You'll be making zoning decisions about this project. The landfill is in the wrong place, always has been, but it's there forever. It exists only because since 1958, planning commissions have added variances and conditional use permits that, like my neighbor says, death from 1,000 cuts, have allowed it to continue evolving into the 535-acre, 1,400-foot deep mountain of garbage that it has become, and set in such an incongruous neighborhood. Initially, the city promised that after a decade or so, Shoal would be converted to recreation. That was almost 40 years ago. Current city documents reveal an intention to create a more permanent waste management industry there. This CUP and the power plant are a step in that direction. A full EIR would provide the necessary due diligence to fully study not only alternatives to the power plant, but also, if they exist, cumulative effects of all 4 projects, and to address much more thoroughly how to mitigate the impacts of this project. The landfill will probably reach its license limit by 2028 or 2030. Please do not enable it to become a perpetual, ever-increasing eyesore and a threat to health and well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Helen Mallory, please.
Because of the fire risk, a full environmental impact report, not just the mitigated declaration, should be done on the biogas power plant and any landfill expansion. The proposed power plant is in a high fire zone, and the MND considers only how the staff of the power plant would get out in the event of a fire. It does not consider the surrounding communities. The landfill and power plant site is surrounded by 10,000 homes on narrow winding streets, many with only one possible escape route in the event of a fire. For example, Glen Oaks Canyon alone has 700 homes and 1 street to get in or out. The MND only considers how a fire would affect Glendale and has no contingency if a fire blows into Pasadena on its eastern edge or Eagle Rock on the south. This has been a bad year for fires. We've seen massive destruction result from what started as a small blaze with a little bit of a breeze. Seismologists now know the landfill and proposed power plant sites sit atop of active earthquake fault. What happens when there's an earthquake? Methane and the natural gas will leak around the power plant or into our neighborhood. And the MND also refers on page 1203 to a report that untreated water leaking from the landfill had a flash point of 81 degrees Fahrenheit. If the wastewater treatment is knocked out in an earthquake, the water will seep out of the landfill into our neighborhoods and could ignite on a warm day. The MND does not take into consideration training of the staff of the landfill to work with the local fire stations in the event of a fire. Without training and coordination for an evacuation in the event of a fire, the death toll could be very grave. Glendale's liability would be immense. As you can see, further study needs to take place before there are any new projects on the site. We must at the very least have a full environmental impact report that takes into consideration all proposed projects. And I want to say, just as a layman, I went on the California EPA website and I found a statement on record that says the landfill site would close by 2028. Thank you. Helen Mallory.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ken Salter.
Good evening. I'm a registered mechanical engineer in the state of California. So to put the magnitude of this project into perspective, I performed some simple calculations. I estimated the mechanical energy produced by the project's engines that's needed to produce 12 megawatts of power, and calculated the equivalent number of automobiles that would produce the same amount of mechanical power. The result surprised me. I calculated from the perspective of power, the project is equivalent to nearly 1,000 automobiles operating at 65 miles per hour, 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. That's like a 4-mile, 8-lane wide freeway circling the landfill. Or to put it in another way, it's like quadrupling the number of lanes of the 134 and the 2 at the perimeter of the Glen Oaks Canyon. This is an enormous scope. I realized the concerns of this. I realized upon doing this calculation that the concerns of this community are not just knee-jerk NIMBYisms, but rather these concerns are rooted in the huge scale of the project relative to its siting. Think about it: 1,000 cars up in the hills all day, every day. With regard to pollution, this may be a drop in the bucket when measured at those distant AQMD measuring sites in San Gabriel, but it doesn't take an engineering degree to conclude that the local effects will be significant and potentially quite detrimental. I think it's, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Michael Mallory?
Would you please state your name when you
Yes.
come speak? Thank you.
Yes. My name is Michael Mallory, but I'm here this evening to present a summary of the findings of Dr. Clarence Hall, who is an area resident and is also a renowned geologist and professor emeritus of geology at UCLA, where he taught for 35 years. And Dr. Hall is actually with us this evening. I only hope I can do justice to his thoughts. Dr. Hall has studied Shoal Canyon and is concerned that this MND for the proposed power plant fails to take into account the geologic risks of the area. The Verdugo Fault, which is one of 6 fault lines within about a 10-mile proximity of the landfill, is only 3/10 of a mile away. A 2008 U.S. Geological Survey shows that the Verdugo Fault has the capacity to produce a Northridge-sized earthquake, 6.7 Richter. You might have remembered that one. Nobody expected it either. The MND also fails to provide specific mitigation for seismic damage to buildings, equipment, tanks, pipelines, claiming that such damage would be less than significant. But HAZUS, the loss estimation software created by FEMA, estimates that the damage to buildings alone could run $24 billion. That's with a B. Neither does the MND adequately take into account the landfill's placement on top of a mountain, which would amplify seismic waves. They go up. Nor does it adequately present mitigation regarding its own finding that Figueroa Street, the main access road to and from the landfill, would likely slide during the quake. Nor does it adequately present geotechnical reports regarding grading plans or include emergency backup plans for gas collection should the proposed power plant go offline because of a quake or a fire. Nor does it adequately address the convincing evidence that contaminated fluid is already leaking from the landfill, a situation that a quake could turn into a disaster. Now, the bottom line is, in terms of seismic considerations, this MND isn't simply inadequate, it might be less than significant. A full EIR should and really must be done before any construction can take place. Thank you very much.
One of our commissioners needs to take a break. So 5-minute recess, please. So we are back from a brief recess. We're going to promptly go to next speaker, Jane Potel.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jane Potel, and I'm here today as a member of the Glendale Environmental Coalition. I urge you to reject the MND that is before you today. GWP is trying to present this as a simple landfill gas collection and processing system, but it is far from simple. This is a full-scale power plant and needs to go through a full environmental impact review. The project would involve putting 4 large diesel engines at SCHOLL. Does GWP have the technical expertise needed to operate these generators? It's not at all clear from the report that they do. The landfill gas at SCHOLL contains impurities that would need to be cleaned up before it can be burned. There are a range of chemicals in landfill gas, many of which come from cleaning and other products people use at home. In order to know the conditions of the gas and the level of impurities, it needs to be sampled and studied. It is unclear if any of this has been done. The level and type of emissions that would come from burning the landfill gas will depend on the conditions of the gas and on the amount of natural gas that will have to blend with it so that the generators can handle it. Nowhere is this described in the MND. A full EIR should be done for the public to understand these issues. Another concern has to do with the maintenance and the oversight of the facility. The report says GWP will have 6 people responsible for watching over the generators, but they are only planning to be on site for 8 hours a day. This means that the generators will be unattended for 16 hours each day. Many things can go wrong, and we can't always count on the automatic shutdown mechanisms to operate when we need them. Are we going to rely on someone on standby who could take who knows how long to get to the site? These are things an EIR needs to address. The MND is silent on them. Please reject this MND and instruct GWP to prepare a full EIR so that the public decision makers know what we are really dealing with here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sharon Landon, please.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Landine. I'm a 30-year resident of Glendale. According to the Mitigated Negative Declaration, all the criteria pollutant emissions from the proposed biogas power plant will exceed the AQMD thresholds. GWP is proposing to offset these pollutants with priority credits, but we know this does not change the actual pollutant emissions. These pollutants can harm the central nervous systems, reduce lung function, cause cellular changes, and affect the immune, reproductive, and developmental systems. The results of the air studies are misleading because they use air monitors 4 and 6 miles away to assess the air quality around the landfill. However, there are thousands of residents much closer to the landfill. While this may be illegal, I don't feel it's moral. The proposed New Grayson power plant is only 5 miles away, and those pollutants were not factored in. AQMD stated in their public comments letter that the MND did not consider how the proposed project's air quality impacts would be affected. When combined with the air quality impacts from the proposed Shoal Canyon landfill expansion, the environmental impact report for the expansion alone concludes that significant adverse air quality that cannot be mitigated would result if expansion occurs. However, in all of the air studies in the MND, the pollutants from the expansion were not added to the pollutants from the Shoal power plant. The air quality section in the MND mentions Lower Shoal Canyon Park, but does not mention the 2,000 plus people that live within a mile in the canyon. It mentions Eagle Rock to the south, but not the thousands of residents who live in Eagle Rock near the dump. It mentions the Rose Bowl to the east, but omits the residents of Linda Vista and Annandale, and it leaves out Chevy Chase Canyon altogether. The proposed project is on a 1,400-foot plateau. The above-mentioned neighborhoods are in lower elevation than the proposed power plant. This is significant because the MND states that due to topography and weather, the pollutants will remain at ground level. When the wind blows, gravity will force them down into the neighborhoods and canyons where they will remain at ground level. It was irresponsible to approve this project because air quality of the whole project has not been accurately calculated or mitigated. This project warrants an environmental impact report. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Quinn Lewis? Is it Owen? Because it looked like Q to me. But that's okay.
Sorry.
I won't.
Somebody else wrote it.
I won't hold it against you.
Thank you.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioner and members. My name is Owen Lewis. I'm a Glendale resident in Shoal Canyon. In a 2010 city report on conversion technology, which also proposed an anaerobic digester along with this power project, the system that burns LFG and gas-fired boilers at Grayson was described as nearing the end of its useful life. Although the boilers are near the end of their service lives, the pipeline from Shoal Canyon to Grayson is in excellent condition, exceeding specs per a January 2017 city report. Why is the city abandoning a system delivering free energy to Grayson in favor of a $14 million project to generate power at the landfill? Facilities to convert landfill gas to energy should remain at the Grayson plant and be included in a revised Grayson Repowering Project, EIR. The money for this project is already part of the Grayson project budget. The infrastructure and space do exist at Grayson, which already has industrial zoning to accommodate other freestanding units at substantially less cost, delivering power directly to the city's main distribution system. So why is the city selected dirty reciprocating engines which require lubrication and coolant maintenance and produce toxic exhaust emissions, so toxic and noisy they require 40-foot tall exhaust stacks and probably would not be allowed at Grayson? A better choice would be scalable micro-turbines, which are highly efficient, have no lubrication or coolant requirements, and produce only clean heat as waste. This technology is well suited for steam and chilled water cogen systems. There are 2 Southern California companies that manufacture these systems, and either would be an excellent partner for green power generation for Glendale at Grayson. I have no financial interest in either company. And why has the city specified 12 megawatts of generating capacity? The amount of Shoal Canyon landfill gas currently available, with a methane concentration of less than 30% by volume, has no more than 1 megawatt of power generation potential with a 10% blend of natural gas, according to calculations by a microturbine distributor. Is the excess capacity to accommodate an anaerobic digester plant later? By the way, the cost of a 1 megawatt microturbine cogen facility at Grayson would be less than $4 million, and operations could be handled by Grayson staff. It would take a 90% blend of natural gas and landfill gas to produce 12 megawatts of power with what's available at the landfill right now. And Grayson and Shoal Canyon landfill are historically and physically linked. This proposal attempts to unlink them in support of the contention that this is new renewable energy project under SCA QMD guidelines. The project viability is based on the prospect of receiving SCA QMD priority reserve offsets, but the relocation of renewable power generation from Grayson to Shoal Canyon landfill does not qualify for offsets because it does not represent new power generation as required. Shoal Canyon LFG has been an unquantified source of free power at Grayson for decades. The city wants to establish an industrial footprint with excess capacity at the landfill to justify the later addition of an anaerobic digester, extending activities at the landfill while not physically expanding it. And the MND minimizes the threat to health and safety of Glendale residents and others posed by this project because no relevant data on air pollution from the Shoal Canyon landfill exists, so cumulative effects cannot be accurately determined. As has been stated, the nearest monitor is 4 miles away. So why do we have 12 megawatts of power specified? Why are we moving this power generation from Grayson to a landfill where the air pollution and water pollution has already been clearly described? Thank you very much.
Dan Cruz. I beg your pardon?
Is it okay for us to question that
of course, if you want to, but you have to. Mr. Dan Cruz?
No, wait. I think you had a question for Quinn.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment or a question on Owen's comment in that.
Mr. Cruz, if you would allow Mr. Lewis.
Yes, please.
Sorry about that, sir.
Thank you.
I don't know, what your basis is as far as when you're claiming that your findings only, from that landfill gas will generate 1 megawatt versus what they are proposing is 12 megawatt. So I want you to elaborate on that a little bit more, and then I'd like to hear from the installers of the system to address that.
And they will because they do have time at the rebuttal time right after. So let's hear Mr. Lewis first.
So I took data on the landfill gas from this 2017, January 2017 report on the pipeline and the gas properties and the system that collects and sends it down to Grayson. There's anywhere from 6,000 to 7,300 cubic feet per minute of landfill gas available, depending on, I guess, the time of year, the time of day, many other variables. In this analysis of the gas done in 2016, methane was found to be 29.5% by volume. There is just no way less than 30% volume of methane in landfill gas can produce 12 megawatts of power. It's simply, with 6,000 to 7,000 cubic feet a minute, it's simply not possible. I have this 1 megawatt figure from consultations with a microturbine manufacturer distributor. I can get that in writing if you like. I do not have any writing at this time, but this is from their engineering staff. That would be burning the gas at with a 10% blend of methane. By the way, these engines are going to be operating at a 10% blend of methane forever. Why else would they be building a 3/4 mile long 3-inch gas line? A 3-inch gas line to start these engines? Ridiculous.
Thank you. All right, next speaker, Dan Cruz.
Ladies, Dan Cruz. Lucky enough to be here tonight to speak for one of my neighbors who's not here, Dr. David Choi. He is a professor, tenured professor at Loyola, and he is also a former environmental consultant. So we're talking about basically, he's been before you, City Council before, and he's talked about alternatives, and that's kind of the main thing we're talking about tonight with the environmental review, and alternatives to something that needs to be fully studied. And this is an abridged version of what he wrote before, and basically it gives one really feasible alternative. And basically it's, instead of having the generators at the SCHOLL land site, SoCal Gas is an alternative, and here's what he says. There are many viable alternatives to installing generators on SCHOLL landfill, which pose terrible dangers to air quality and problems for all the residents in Glendale, and might I add, Glendale, Pasadena, Los Angeles. It's surrounded by communities. And one option, this is the option, is to connect and release SCHOLL landfill gas to pipelines owned by SoCal Gas, right? They already have the facilities, which are omnipresent in Glendale and quite easy to do. Now, Glendale Water and Power can use and sell the gas and generate revenue as well as benefit from subsidies and credits. It's very simple. There are some investment needed, around 10 to 15 million, and about the same amount of putting up the power plant, which was at the time projected to be 14 million. Now it's, I think I heard 25 to 30 million. So it's gone up double from what we've heard before. Now it's a safer, cleaner, more profitable option for Glendale. It's safer for the residents. It's more profitable for us. We don't have to spend as much. We are your constituents. City Council appoints you as our commissioners. We're all on the same page here, right? We all want what's best for Glendale and for the residents. Now, some of us have spoken to the SoCal Gas employees, and this is what we've learned. The cost of operation would be, for this alternative, would be around $10 per MBTUs, right? And with all the credits from the state, renewable fuel standard credits, if we had this system currently, we could make a revenue of about 30 MBTUs, closer to about 40. So $10, 40. There's a big gain in what's the word I'm looking for? So nervous. You're making a lot of profit as a city, right? Thank you. The credits, as we know,
gross profit.
Gross profits. Well, yes, gross profits, but even then, better than spending $30 million. The credits may be phased out over time. We may know that we don't know what's going to happen with that, but this alternative is likely to be more profitable, more likely to be more profitable than generating electricity at SCHOLL. Aside from all the environmental factors, this is just practically looking at the numbers, right? So we learned that GWP never seriously considered this option with SoCalGas. Now there was a meeting scheduled on this topic a few minutes, you know, but it was never implemented. Nobody, they canceled. GWP canceled the meeting.
In regards to getting the gas into SoCal.
To speaking with SoCal.
Meeting with us.
It never happened. Let's see, currently SoCal South Coast Air Quality Management District is currently requesting ideas for reducing on-site combustion to reduce NOx flares. Now, SCHOLL would be a prime candidate for this $3 to $4 million grant. So
Mr. Cruz,
Glendale,
you need to wrap it up.
Glendale would be getting money to examine the new system.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Myra Sun.
Good evening. My name is Myra Sun, and I live in one of those communities, Eagle Rock adjacent, that has been talked about tonight. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, an MND, I respectfully submit, is the wrong procedure for evaluating this proposed project. A CEQA project is defined as the whole of an action, and these terms have been interpreted to mean that what everyone here is calling two separate projects are in fact one action if they are, quote, closely related to the same overall objective, and we know they are here. That overall objective is increased electricity generation. So, respectfully, no matter how many times people say these two projects are separate, under the law, I think that there's a very good chance that that's not true. They are one. And the level of environmental review of an environmental impact report is required if, and I think someone has said it, if there's substantial evidence of an impact on the environment. And there is, whether or not you combine considerations of Grayson or you just consider the Shoal Canyon project by itself. Because independent of Grayson, you've heard about air quality and seismic and fire hazards that are not addressed in this MND. And when you do consider the Grayson project, if you look at the environmental impact report that's been prepared for the Grayson project, they actually do mention Shoal Canyon. And I think it's, I think it's under cumulative effects. So that really doesn't sound separate to me. But it also talks about an anaerobic digester, and it notes that the location of the anaerobic digester has not been determined. But you've also heard tonight about the possibility that building this power plant will simply expand the footprint and cause more development at Shoal Canyon, which could include an anaerobic digester. It's part of the whole record before you, and because you don't know what the specifics of the anaerobic digester are, you can't certify that those environmental impacts would be mitigated. There is, in fact, I think, every indication of a detriment to the public health, safety, general welfare, and the environment. And so I would respectfully suggest that you can't tonight make a finding of fact that all of those things are addressed in this MND. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Jerry Rankin. Jerry Rankin.
I'm Jerry Rankin, member of Board of Directors, Glen Oaks Canyon Homeowners Association. I feel humble and inadequate, following all of the highly articulate and persuasive speakers that you have heard so far. But having an 80-year relationship with the San Rafael Hills and almost that long with Dr. Clarence Hall, I believe that people here will humor me while I make a few comments. To begin with, I want to make clear that I totally agree that the power station being proposed at Shoal Canyon Landfill has from the start been viewed as an integral part of the Grayson Repowering Project. Also, I have concluded that the anaerobic digestion facility planned for the Shoal Canyon Landfill to be built next door to the power station was also meant to be an integral part of the Grayson Repowering Project, as well as the landfill itself. I have a copy of a document dated May 10th, 2016, written by city staff as a background paper for the proposed Grayson Repowering Project and the proposed biogas renewable generation project. According to the document, the City Council on August 19, 2014, gave one company, Pace Global, the job of planning both projects simultaneously, coordinating the two projects step by step. Okay, there are those, including some living in Glendale, who are not concerned about more carbon gas and other toxins being released into the atmosphere. They think they can handle it. They have good lungs. And there are those who are not concerned about global warming. They figure that human activity has little to do with it. Nevertheless, I'll bet we would not be able to find a single resident of Glendale that would be pleased to live in a city that is about to go bankrupt over a $500 million expense it could not finance. That is what I fear for Glendale. Regardless of opposition from some of those in the party now running the federal government, the state of California is strongly supporting an approach to the generation of electric power that is diametrically opposed to what Glendale Water and Power wants to do. And that is a very risky way to face the future. We have a surplus of gas-fired power plants in California, and we have a surplus of electricity available on the grid. Much of that electricity is generated by renewable, non-polluting means, such as solar panels, wind farms, hydroelectricity, volcanic activity below the surface of the earth, even methane gas from landfill trash. The state is bound and determined to eliminate, as soon as possible, virtually all gas-fired power plants in California. As a result, renewable, non-polluting methods of generating electricity are being subsidized one way or another, and the price of electricity on the grid in California keeps going down, not up. Yet,
in conclusion, sir?
Yeah. Okay, I read the newspapers. Every week or so I read another article about one or more communities or one or more private electricity companies planning to decommission their gas-fired power plants due to the glut of electric power in California and due to the inducements that are being given to those who produce electricity by solar, wind, and other types of renewable, non-polluting methods of production.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin.
Don't the managers of Glendale Water and Power read the newspapers?
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. Appreciate your time. Nancy Schnebly, or Schnelby. Eileen Hartrick, or Hattrick?
Good evening. My name is Eileen Hattrick, and my presentation is very short because so many of these eloquent speakers already spoke to some of the issues. But I'm from Eagle Rock, and I know the area pretty well. And my concern is basically the proximity of this project to the community. And I think it was discussed earlier that the air quality stations that are actually monitoring the air quality are very much away from where the community is. As Sharon Landon said, they're about 4 to 6 miles away. So this to me is a huge flaw. when you take a look at the community right by Shoal Canyon, basically this is what you get. You get a recreation park, the Eagle Rock Recreation Park, which is 3/10 of a mile from Shoal Canyon, and that recreation park services, and I talked to the manager of the park, 1,000 students a week. It also is the PE spot for one of the schools across the street, a charter school. They use that every day, and I see them in there every day using it as a PE facility. There is also 7 homes located 2/10 of a mile from Shoal Canyon, and there's a park, the Richard Alatari Park and the Eagle Rock Canyon Trail, which is a neighborhood landmark. That's 2/10 of a mile from the canyon. And there are 5 schools, Cal Charters, Rockdale, Troca Charter, a Montessori, and Dahlia Heights within a mile of the canyon. So I think those are very strong reasons why we should take a look at a more intensive study, the EIR, because we do have children right within a mile, thousands of children within a mile of this facility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ethan Sade.
Good evening. My name is Eitan Sadeh, and I want to talk about the issue with the noise during the construction. So I also would like to urge you to reject the NMD, and I'll say why. Even though the NMD states that the noise impacts are less than significant, I beg to differ. The noise coming from the operation of the project will affect the surrounding neighborhoods. The sensitive noise receptors map, which I think is right there, identifies receptors in Glen Oaks Canyon, the Fair Oaks development in Chevy Chase, Linda Vista, Annandale, and 2 locations in Eagle Rock. According to the noise analysis, these neighborhoods are within the closest proximity to the proposed project. The noise level will be highest in Eagle Rock. However, the NMD puts the nearest Eagle Rock receptors south of the 134, when in fact there are homes with families north of the freeway, which are closer to the place of construction, and they have not been identified in the NMD. This is important because, according to the NMD, the duration of sounds is important, since sounds that occur over a long period of time cause annoyance, pain, and emotional stress. And I understand that the construction will last about 18 months, so that's a long period of time. And construction activities will be conducted Monday through Friday between the hours 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And because of this, the construction noise will be exempt from the City of Pasadena, City of Los Angeles, and the City of Glendale noise ordinances. What about the parents of small children who are home during the day, the elderly, the retired people, the people who work at home, the schools, the recreation centers, outdoor parks, all which are within close proximity to the proposed projects? The proposed landfill expansion project was also found to be cumulatively affect nearby receptors for noise exposures, but actual noise levels were not affected in the MND. They were not factored in the NMD. The county public works in public comments asked for the source information for the following. 1, the presumed ambient noise level. 2, facility noise and combined noise ambient plus facility. And 3, the basis for the use of factors selected in the noise impact thresholds.
Mr. Sada, I'm going to ask you to conclude.
Okay.
With your best thought.
Okay. Therefore, In area of noise, the NMD does not fully address or mitigate all the pertinent issues related to the noise and should not be approved.
Thank you very much, sir. Sean Starkey.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Sean Starkey, S-E-A-N. I'm here on behalf of Councilmember Jose Huizar, LA City Council member for the 14th District, which represents the community of Eagle Rock. We also agree that the landfill gas is important and needs to be processed. It has been being done so for the last 20 years. There's no reason to stop that and just flare it off. Why not continue burning it and converting it for energy at the Grayson Power Plant? The GWP continuously keeps saying that there's only two options. Either build the new power plant at Shoal Canyon or flare it off. There has to be other options. Flaring off cannot even be thought of. We submitted comments during the public comment. We feel the responses were not adequate. Community outreach has not been done. The community of Eagle Rock, which represents 35,000 people, has not had any public meetings held in and very little information shared. The city of Pasadena has not had any communications with at all. This is being built on our border, and we feel that community outreach should be required. I encourage you to take the time, just ask for all the options. There's no reason why this project should not require an EIR. It is a power plant being built. So please take the time and ask them to explore other options. So, thank you.
Thank you. Pia Harris? Is it Ria or Pia? Pia. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening to everyone. I'm from Eagle Rock. My name is Pia Harris, and I'm a current resident for over 25 years. I'm here because I would like to express my concern about the impact of the project on transportation and traffic patterns, which is in section 3.16. The city has 3 currently proposed projects at the landfill: the expansion, a biogas renewable energy facility, and an anaerobic digester facility. According to the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works, all 3 projects would use the same hauling routes, access roads, and feeder roads, and will potentially be operating at the same time. The single entrance to the landfill on Figueroa already serves hundreds of trucks per day, and waits 20 minutes or more on the access road are not unusual. What would the combined impact of these projects be on traffic patterns and access to the facilities and to the surrounding communities? Congestion might be especially difficult during the construction period, while regular trash hauling continues. The power plant would be directly above the 134 freeway to the south, which is a major evacuation route in emergencies. How would a major fire or earthquake near the power plant compromise this freeway? Ultimately, closing the Shoal Canyon eliminates this very concern of mine. And really, just listening to the lady in front of me earlier, that a full comprehensive environment impact report is a necessity and not the MND, which is piecemeal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Nina, is it Komsky or Chomsky? Okay.
Good evening. I am Nina Chomsky. I live in the Linda Vista Annandale area near the Arts Center, and I am the president of the Linda Vista Annandale Association. But I'm not here tonight on behalf of LVAA because we haven't had a chance to meet and take a board position. Why is that? Because I've only found out about this whole situation a few days ago, several weeks ago actually. And I've discovered in my research that the staff at the city of Pasadena didn't bother to notify our council member, Steve Madison, of this proposed project, or the Linda Vista Annandale Association, and indeed we are full of sensitive receptors. So let me give you just my initial reactions, and these are my own views for now, but I will be sure that our neighborhood is fully informed, and I will find out why the city, perhaps it's part of the relationship of Pasadena and Glendale, which is sort of strained these days, didn't tell us. My response is, looking at the whole situation, it seems like we have a whole plan to redo Glendale's power operations, and I don't know if that's written down somewhere. It should be. And we know about the expansion idea. Then we have this proposal, and then we have 2 more projects, and they're all related. How could they not be related? And particularly the expansion. I think the expansion and this proposed project seem very related. Of course, we'll get even more gas to burn or to use if we expand. And then there's the Grayson project that I'm not as familiar with, but it seems that that is inextricably related. And so what is happening here? It seems to me obvious, illegal, inadequate, but illegal segmentation to break down this these 4 projects and have them all float around in different universes, and somehow they'll all come back together someday. Well, that's not permitted under CEQA. And I think you should look at the whole project, but at least look at this particular project with an EIR that connects everything to all the other projects. And what do you get? And it was mentioned several times, you get alternatives, real alternatives to be studied when you have an EIR. But one thing that wasn't mentioned up to now is you get an environmentally superior alternative that has to be identified under an EIR, and that's really important. And that's no environmentally superior alternative is identified anywhere here. These fine neighbors have come up with several, but not officially. On the issue of fire, we are very concerned. We're always concerned with fire in the Linda Vista Annandale area. We have open canyons. We have the narrow streets. I've heard a number of our neighbors say, well, we won't have to worry, we'll go through Glendale. Oh, really? To get out. They often say that. And I would add to your consideration about how we're all going to be in a panic situation, unable to get out. Add 90,000 people at the Rose Bowl for an event who are panicked to get out, and on the 134 or over your streets or our narrow streets, fire is a major issue for you to consider. Thank you.
Dr. Christopher Snowdy.
Good evening. My name is Chris Snowdy. I'm a child psychiatrist, which means that I'm a licensed medical doctor with expertise on the developing brain. I live on East Glen Oaks Boulevard, and I felt compelled to come share some of my knowledge with you out of concern for our community's children. In the air quality impact discussion on page 100 of the negative deck study, it asserts to you that the nearest non-residential sensitive receptors are over 1.5 miles away at Eagle Rock Elementary. This is simply not true. Shoal Canyon Ball Field, where hundreds of kids regularly play, is right next door. Just last week, our mayor said that he takes his kids there to practice. The surveyors were aware of this. They stood in the parking lot to take a picture. They talked about it in terms of noise, but they did not talk about it in terms of the impact on the air quality. This is an adjacent concentrated source of sensitive receptors that they completely left out of their air impact analysis, and therefore their statements are invalid. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, are a major pollutant from biogas combustion. They've been featured in over 1,800 articles referencing health impacts in the last 20 years. This study is just one of dozens on the impact of the brain, and I chose it because it was done by the division chair of child psychiatry at USC. He's a local guy. The kids in this study were exposed to in utero high levels of PAH, which in this study was 8. Please keep that number in mind. 8 nanograms per cubic meter. They were followed from birth until they were 9 years old, and they showed significant decreases in brain matter volumes, slower processing speeds, increased symptoms of inattention, poor impulse control, hyperactivity, and increased delinquent behavior. Now, Steve Brady, who is the managing principal hydrogeologist in the negative deck study, knows about the health impacts of PAHs because page 806 will tell you that he previously compiled a human health risk assessment involving benzoapyrene, which is featured in this study, and successfully argued for and authored a project to clean the stuff out of the soil in Fresno. Despite his knowledge and despite all the literature, PAHs are mentioned only once in the study. They're not analyzed, but they're listed in a standard table of emissions from landfill gas combustions on page 496. Using that table, and I said remember the number 8, using that table, this power plant would spill 132 nanograms per cubic meter of PAHs into the air every day. That's in addition to what's already coming off of the highway, and that is 16 times the level, the high level of PAH, which damaged these kids. I guess it's left to our imaginations whether or not that 132, by the time it wafts down the hill and enters the lungs of our playing children, whether that 132 will get down below 8. This is not a time for half measures. Our children depend on us to get this right. Our children are worth the cost of an EIR.
Thank you, sir. Rick Marquez.
Good evening, Commission, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rick Marcus. I'm president of the Glen Oaks Canyon Homeowners Association. We call ourselves GOTCHA. GOTCHA is comprised of about 700 plus households that are adjacent to this landfill. We're really an apolitical organization. Our only real goals are to protect and preserve the canyon that we love and we call our home. Many of the members of GOTCHA, the board, and members of our community are here tonight. I'm humbled by their comments, not only their passion for what brings them to the canyon, but also the knowledge that they brought to this meeting this evening. I'm going to keep my comments real brief. The first thing is that the canyon as a whole, our residents, are very much against the approval of a biogas project merely by the use of an MND, period. An environmental impact report should have been prepared for this project by an independent entity. The City Council, Mr. Zurn, and members of the applicant here have met with myself personally and members of my board, and we have discussed our concerns about the landfill for many years, which included the landfill expansion, the installation of an anaerobic digestion facility, and potentially this power plant. We've made it very clear that we have issues with this expansion. Surprisingly, though, there's an EIR on the table right now as we speak with respect to the expansion, and it still has not been certified after the community's comments on this EIR. So how is it that we're going to approve or discuss approving a one-off project that is probably part of a big whole when we haven't even concluded and certified the first EIR? Gentlemen, irresponsible. It's absolutely irresponsible that we are looking at sneaking a project under the radar when you've all been told and informed by very smart people that this needs to be investigated further. The biogas project is not an isolated project, and it's clearly linked to the other projects that are in the work for the landfill. As such, an EIR is demanded and should be done. To conclude, pursuant to Glendale Muni Code, a conditional use permit, which is actually being sought tonight, I believe, may be granted only if the following findings of fact can be made. And I'm just going to pick one of them, and that is the use of its associated structures and facilities will not be detrimental to the public health or safety, the general welfare, or the environment. To conclude, Such facts have not been yet presented, and as such, a conditional use permit should not be granted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Brotman?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dan Brotman, and I'm a co-founder of the Glendale Environmental Coalition. As you may know, we've been working over the last 6 months to 9 months to get the city to rethink its approach to Grayson and to look at alternatives, clean energy alternatives to meeting Glendale's needs. I had a script prepared here. One of the I guess the disadvantages of coming late is I don't get to sound smart by saying all these great things that everybody has already said. So I'm going to abandon this script, but I do have 2 comments I want to make on this question of whether it is legitimate to look at these as 2 separate projects, which I would say it is not. I heard the gentleman from Stantec say that this project can be looked at on a standalone basis because and I think this is a quote, the biogas project is not a reasonable consequence of Grayson. That's what I believe he said. That's very puzzling to me because the Grayson project involves removing the units that currently burn landfill gas. Everybody knows that. And consequently, if the Grayson plan goes ahead, there is no capacity to burn landfill gas at Grayson. Now, Mr. Zurn said there is no space at Grayson to put up new units. So therefore, it's very clear that this project is a direct consequence of the decision to repower Grayson. I don't understand how it can be considered not connected to the Grayson decision. The other thing I want to say is that it really feels to me that these projects were split for one and only one reason. And that is because had they been considered together, the increase in generation from these 2 projects would have exceeded 50 megawatts. If you exceed 50 megawatts of new generation, you have to go to Sacramento and get approval from the California Energy Commission. Of course, I understand that GWP doesn't want to go through that, but that doesn't make it right. Thank you.
Mike Mohill.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am the last person, I assume, Mr. Astorian?
No, you're not.
There's still more?
No, you're not.
Okay.
Let's not flatter ourselves.
Okay, well, thank you. You know, I moved into Glen Oaks Canyon about 1977. And one of the first things I experienced in the canyon where I live is methane gas. And I was told by GWP, no big deal, we're working on it. Took nearly 3 years to work on it, so the gas is no longer in my backyard. In about year 2008, 2009, there was an issue before the Glendale City Council. It was about expanding GWP, having more cities use Shoal Canyon landfill. I went before the City Council. I said, wait a second. I live in Glendale. I don't live in Pasadena. I don't live in Los Angeles or Atwater or any place else. I live in Glendale and I pay Glendale taxes. And the only reason you want to expand and let other cities use our landfill is because, as Jim Starber, the city manager, was saying that evening, was the revenue is down. God bless America, the revenue is down. And that means, as the Glendale resident, that means that landfill will last longer and longer time. No, they want to get more and more revenue. Then next came the mega apartment complexes in the downtown Pacific plan, and all those large buildings all generated trash. And where did they put that trash? You got it, Shoal Canyon landfill. As a Glendale resident, I'm mad because the city council doesn't care about me. They care about only a couple people. Number one, the city payroll, because they need the money to pay the pensions. That's it. That's it. Now, what they should be thinking about doing is closing down the landfill, like they promised us years ago. Yes, it's going to cost money to move the trash somewhere out in the desert, and I'll pay more money for it. Ask the people. Do we want to have the problems of the landfill? And one of the things I found was very amusing was the noise level. It won't be much, really. Really, not much. Will these people be living in my backyard? Will our city council members be living in my backyard? Will you be living in my backyard? Anybody. The people behind me who live in Glen Oaks Canyon live in my backyard. And they want this landfill shut down. They don't want it to be expanded because it's not in their benefit. And as you have that hum going all day long like a freeway noise, when you sleep with the hum, you wake up in the morning, you hear the hum, it's a hum and a hum and a hum. We don't want to hear a hum, hum, hum. We want to hear the word, it's been shut down as promised.
Mr. Mueller, please conclude.
Did the yellow button go off already? Yeah. Well, I'm a winning guy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marla Nelson. Marla Nelson.
Hi. I'm getting over a cold, so please excuse. Hi, I'm Marla Nelson. I've lived in Glendale for over 30 years. The final MND states that the population of Glen Oaks Canyon is 572. Well, that's wrong. According to the most recent census data, the population of Glen Oaks Canyon is 2,075, nearly 4 times greater than the MND reports. And that's just Glen Oaks Canyon. It doesn't take into account the rest of Glendale, much less Pasadena, Eagle Rock, or any other nearby areas. It doesn't take into consideration the nearby schools that our children attend. Would the negative effects stop at the borders of any of these areas? Of course not. What else might the MND have gotten wrong? What else? This glaring error seems representative of the entire effort we, the people, have been experiencing for years with the landfill expansion and the development of a new unnecessary power plant. It does not take people into consideration. The whole idea of city government is for the government to serve the needs of its people. In this case, the government seems to have it exactly backwards. The government seems to view people as existing for the purpose of serving the needs of the city government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Amy Koss.
Hi. My name is Amy Koss. I've been a Glendale resident for over 20 years. And like Marla said, I also, we are all very busy. And so we have to count on our government and the people that need to look at these things to look after us and have our best interests at heart. We shouldn't have to say, what are they up to? And wow, it feels like something is being slid past us. This is not a good feeling. And to speak for others who don't have a voice, the MND shows on page 3417 that the California buckwheat scrub vegetation will be impacted by the project. That vegetation type is known to be preferred vegetation that's for the federally endangered California gnatcatcher. And yet, the MND section on special status wildlife on page 3412 makes no mention of this species. Surveys to confirm the absence of this for this species are frequently required by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Our local endangered species are one more reason for a full environmental impact report. Thank you.
Thank you. Margarita Drew.
Hello. I'm Margarita Drew. Many of my points have already been covered, so I don't want to besiege you, but I'm just so disappointed. I've been disappointed for years. I bought a beautiful house in Glen Oaks Canyon 5 years ago and have been fighting the battle of the dump for 4 years with the city council not listening. And so I just want to, I guess what I'll do with my time is to just remind you of the people that are affected by this. Within a 2-mile radius of the landfill where we want to put a power plant, there are 15 elementary, middle school, and high school. So 15 schools, elementary, middle school, high school. The landfill's in the middle of a triangulate of 3 colleges: Art Center, which I worked at, Occidental College of Design, where I went, and Glendale Community College. I may be a Glendale resident, but I grew up in Pasadena and I spent my college years in Eagle Rock. And this project affects me so deeply, and I'm not the only one, as you've heard. I'm tired of bureaucrats and money and officials not thinking about the hearts that beat, the children that bleed, the people that die. I'm tired of seeing relatives go through cancer treatments, and yet everything we're saying to the city council was ignored. There was no press for an EIR. You're getting away with an MND, and you're our last hope. City Planning Commission, tonight, your vote is not just for a power plant. It is for people's lives and their quality of life, and that means something. Our country is too much about corporations and big business deals and making more monies for cities or states or for whoever. We are the people of America. We're not asking for entitlements. We're not asking to be taken care of. We're just asking that you respect us and that you listen to us. And quite frankly, for the last 4 years, the City Council has not listened to us. Ms. Friedman, Mr. Ochoa, they've gone on to do whatever they're doing. They've left their mark of not listening and gone on to greater ambition. But we're still here. We are still living here. My child goes to elementary school in Glen Oaks Canyon. Is he going to get cancer once this power plant goes through? The Boy Scouts of Troop 125 meet in Glen Oaks Park. Are they all going to get cancer? And that's not even including everyone who attends activities at the Rose Bowl. That's over 1 million people a year. At the Aquatic Center, children are taking swim lessons. At Kids Space down by the Rose Bowl, that's all kids and families. There is so much here at stake. So I don't want to give you stats. I don't want to give you numbers. I want to open your hearts to realize that flesh is more important. And I'm not at all condemning either any of your individual characters. I'm condemning the machinery that we've all been living under and continue to live under. Please, please, this vote is so important. Please consider that.
Thank you. Sylvia Dellinger. Sylvia Dellinger.
Very hard act to follow. My name is Sylvia Denlinger, and my colleague Becky Neumann was here and had to leave. We're from the Eagle Rock Neighborhood Council. And first of all, I wanted to say that we found out about this through some kind of back channel. We have 35,000 people in Eagle Rock. We border the Shoal Canyon on the south, as you know. And we would like to have been notified, because we are assuming a great deal of risk: earthquake risk, fire risk, air pollution risk. We pay for those roads that your trucks ride on, and yet nobody said a word to us. So that's initially, but it's a smaller matter. The larger matter is that we do assume this risk, especially of earthquake risk. I'm the public safety director for Eagle Rock. There's a fault line running right under the 134. That landfill is going to liquefy if an earthquake hits. An earthquake will hit. Maybe not today, maybe not in 5 years, but it might hit today, and it might hit tomorrow. And that's the problem, because we are right downhill from that Shoal Canyon. And right now, it's okay, you know? But you're asking to put a large gas burning plant on that with no environmental impact report. You're asking us to assume these risks with no idea of what risks we're assuming. I mean, the first thing I asked as public safety director is what did it say about the earthquake? What kind of, I mean, at the time that Shoal Canyon was built, at the time the 134 was built, the geological survey did not have as extensive an idea of the fault activity in those areas, and now they do. And so expanding the gas plant right in an area that is part of an active fault area seems to be kind of hazardous thing to do. And as I say, I can only speak for Eagle Rock, but that's 35,000 people that I'm trying to speak for, and to ask you not to do this. So we do oppose the conditional use. Eagle Rock Neighborhood Council opposes the conditional use permit, and we would like to see an environmental impact report at the very least that you could do. In fact, it would be nice to know what's going on right now with the environment and the air pollution coming from Shoal Canyon. I have a feeling it's a little worse than, but as I say, we would like, that's what Eagle Rock Neighborhood Council would like. Environmental
So
impact
you are
report.
speaking on behalf of Eagle Rock Council?
Yes.
Okay.
We oppose the expansion of the Shoal Canyon.
Okay, you understand there is no expansion of Shoal Canyon?
Into building a gas plant. Isn't that what you're planning to do?
But nobody is expanding the Shoal Canyon.
To build a gas plant on Shoal Canyon with 2 40-foot smokestacks.
Thank you. No, you can't. If you have a card filled out, you're more than welcome to come and speak, and I'll allow you to do that. But thank you very much for your time.
Okay.
All right, Audrey Zarokian.
Hi, my name is Audrey Zarokian, and I live in Glendale. I'm going to speak about the lack of transparency in informing everybody about this proposed project. So there has been a lack of transparency in informing the stakeholders about the proposed projects at Glendale's dump. Public notification for the biogas power plant was buried under a LA address on the city's environmental review website. It was inadvertently discovered by a gotcha board member only days before the public comments on this 1,300-page document was due. Thankfully, through the combined efforts of Eagle Rock and Glendale residents, an extension on the public comments period was received. The head of Glendale Water and Power stated in an email to a Glendale resident that notices were provided to representatives of the surrounding homeowners associations and that the biogas MND documents were available at the counter of GWP upon request. Upon checking with surrounding homeowners associations, none had received the said notification. The County of LA was not notified. The LA City Council member for Eagle Rock was not notified. CFLA, my coalition, the one we started when we first found out about the proposed project at Shoal Canyon, Coalition for Landfill Alternatives, was not notified, though we provided our contact information to Steve Zurn and his office many times, requesting to be included in any and all notifications regarding any proposed projects at Glendale's dump. The County of LA requested and received a second extension to the comments period because they had not been notified of the MND initially. In the fall of 2017, a gotcha board member and CFLA member went to the Community Development Department and asked to view the MND documents that were supposed to be there. There were no such documents available there for him to review. He was directed to GWP to see if the MND documents might possibly be available there, but no MND documents were available at GWP either. This is contradictory to what is stated in the intent to adopt a MND for the biogas project. We feel that if the stakeholders were given the early opportunity to provide input on these projects, that perhaps GWP may have come up with a project that would work for everyone. A little bit off topic in regards to the notification process, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the Stantec rep contradicted himself earlier when he said that they can't continue to pump the methane to Grayson because the new power generators proposed at Grayson would not be the kind that could handle the methane. Therefore, we have to have a generator somewhere else, at the landfill site, obviously. He then went on to say that the Grayson project has nothing to do with the biogas project, that they're independent of one another, that one is not a result of the other, which to me seems contradictory. And, well, if
You can wrap up.
I can wrap up. Okay.
I've afforded that to everybody.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say that we're not asking for much. We're just asking for an EIR. We're taxpayers. We have the right to ask for this, and I feel like it's not a, you know, if we're wrong and there aren't that many negative impacts, then the EIR will prove it. And if we're right, there are significant impacts, then the EIR will prove it. We're not asking for much. Thank you for your time.
Robin Lee Hansen.
Good evening. My name is Robin Lee Hansen. Our family has owned the home that we live in Glen Oaks Canyon since 1934. We are the fourth generation to live in that house. And since we've moved in that house, I have developed bronchitis, I've developed asthma, I'm a non-smoker, and I'm sure that it's a direct result of living where I live. You can often get smells from the upper canyon. When I started tending my grandchildren at my home, they too developed asthma and bronchitis. I find it really hard to believe that they're not related. And we have worked on this project with City Council for 4 years. And we're rebuffed, and I feel we're lied to. So consider the people that pay your salary. Thank you.
Ms. Hanson, by the way, we are not salaried. We do this voluntarily.
Thank you.
Rhonda Mills.
Thank you. You're just a volunteer.
It's the truth.
I know, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Rhonda Mills. I'm presenting on behalf of the collaborative Eagle Rock Beautiful, which you've heard prior, owns a park, privately maintained park for the public right next to the proposed project. I appreciate very much Mr. Joe notifying us at the beginning of this hearing that he did respond to our comments. The folks that submitted those on behalf of us evidently didn't send them to the right place. We didn't hear from you this week, so I haven't had a chance to go through your comments thoroughly. I glanced through them and I found them a little lacking. They reminded me of the comments to the City of LA's comments, which included a lot of statements like, we don't have to respond to all the questions, so we're not going to respond to this question. And you know, when you, sir, have a room filled with women bringing their children here at night, and elderly men like Professor Hall or Dr. Snowdy coming in, you know that this is an important issue. This isn't just an NIMBY thing. I want to just talk real quickly about what the big picture is and how do we get here today. We got here today because AQMD is on the case of Glendale Water and Power for burning dirty landfill gas in an uncontrolled power plant called Grayson. That is why we are here. If they cleaned up that gas, they could put it in any kind of machine they wanted. They want to run the dirty gas in a reciprocating engine, and as a former U.S. Navy aviation person, I'll tell you those engines are jet engines that have 40-foot smokestacks on them. So that's why we're here. That's why this community is nervous. You have LA, you have a city is opposed to this, looking for a full EIR, as is your entire community. Mr. Zurn might speak with his consultants and remind him that we've taken our time to come here tonight. Like I said, people have brought their children here. So the consultants to this project might want to tell us that they don't have to talk to us, but they could have run a process that had community outreach in it. They would have avoided this hearing and the consternation that's going on throughout the community. Go back to what the big picture is. This is inextricably linked to Grayson, the new repower, which is not a done deal, okay? So they're picking and choosing how they want to relate this project to Grayson. They've said they're going to get priority reserve credits from the AQMD. I have not seen that in writing. That decision will be based solely on the fact of whether Grayson is going to be needed as a power load to the city. And it's going to have a 38% load factor, which means it's going to run less than 40% of the time, but be built supposedly because they have a big need. This is a big tangled mess, okay? It needs to be untangled. This commission has a chance to sit back for a second, not let a 30-year project go by. You are the last stop. This does deserve to look at alternatives. Thank you,
ma'am. Isabel Mayer?
Good evening, members of the Commission. I first of all want to take the opportunity to thank you for giving us a chance to voice our objections to this project. I think if any of you lived in Glen Oaks Canyon or Eagle Rock or Pasadena, you would probably be among us. We have good reason to be concerned about this. I have lived in our home in Glen Oaks Canyon for 44 years. We love our canyon. We knew there was a landfill in there. What we didn't know that the landfill was going to be expanded beyond its original size again and again. And now we're talking about adding a power plant to the mix. For the last 28 years, I have run as a community volunteer a disaster preparedness program in our canyon. And it's of great concern to me with regard to fire, an earthquake, and environmental impacts, namely the leaching of toxins from the landfill into the groundwater, which is possible because in the days that this landfill was created, there was no call for a liner. And the fact is that this landfill does not have a liner. So there are many problems involved with it. Now, to make it continue and add additional landfill as well as add a power plant does not make sense. I think the people in our canyon have more than paid their dues by tolerating the smells and the noises and the pollution from this landfill. And I think it's time to give us a break and put this power plant where it belongs, namely at Grayson. Now, I understand that Mr. Zurn has a different concern. His job is to try and get additional power to the people of Glendale. But I have a question for you. If we're so concerned about the amount of power we have, why are we building thousands of apartments in Glendale? That means thousands of more people moving into our area. That's just going to make the problem even worse. How about conservation? How about limiting expansion? That's what would make sense instead of making the problem worse and worse. Let me just check and make sure that oh yes. I think it's very important to remember that, especially nowadays, there is a real disconnect in credibility between the people and their government. And I think this is a chance for the government of Glendale to prove that when they say they're going to close a landfill when it reaches its capacity, the people of Glendale can believe them. And I hope that you will become part of the process that restores credibility to the government of Glendale, so that when they tell us something, we don't have to question them at every step, but they have a certain amount of credibility to fall back on. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody here that hasn't spoken, that wishes to speak and hasn't filled out a card? Okay. Please proceed one at a time. Introduce yourself, but you need to fill out a card afterwards and bring it to me, please.
My name is Bonnie Voland, and I know one thing. If someone's resisting an EIR, which would be a fact-based study by an independent body that would bring the facts, if they're afraid of that, it means they've got something to hide. Whenever someone says, I don't want the facts, it's because they're not telling you the truth. We need an EIR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Fred Stifter. I've been a resident of Glen Oaks Canyon for 37 years. And when we first moved in, there was quite a smell coming from the landfill. And that was mitigated by the pipes. And then also they put in some generators up there. The problem with the generators was that they were very loud. So these generators that you may be proposing up there, I hope are going to be as quiet as a Subaru idling. If that's the case, that would be acceptable. Another issue that was brought up by one of my neighbors this last week was there were two very good friends, residents on Sleepy Hollow Drive, that both developed cancer, not at the same time, but within about 7 or 8 years of one another. And they lived in that canyon, in the same street, for, probably about 15 years. I don't know whether it's related at all. But the one thing I do think you need to do is consider what impacts. I don't know if there's any studies that will relate or correlate the incidences of lung cancer, colon cancer, kidney cancer, whatever. But I think that there may be some correlation and it should be investigated. So I would support having an EIR.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will be taking a recess for 10 minutes, and then after that, I think we'll have the applicant about 5 or 7 minutes to respond back to what we just heard. So we'll close it right now. So we are back from a brief recess, and we'll continue our intriguing conversations tonight. I believe we are going to have the applicant is going to have sufficient time for us to respond to some of the comments that were made tonight, plus answering some of the questions that we have because of the comments that were made tonight.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, again, Steve Zurn, General Manager, Glendale Water and Power. I'm going to just talk a little bit about this as a renewable energy project, and then I will let the technical experts come up and address some of the other issues that were raised, noise, traffic, and fire, and those type of things. But there was a little difficult here because we talked about closing the landfill, we talked about expanding the landfill or not expanding the landfill. We had one speaker go on about Grayson and whether we should build Grayson or not. And the idea here is this is about the biogas project. So there were some comments made. One speaker even went as far as to indicate this is not a green project, not a renewable project, and something the legislature wouldn't approve of. And I apologize, I'm paraphrasing my scribble here. The fact of the matter is this is absolutely a renewable project under every definition of the California State Legislature. That's exactly who set the tone. This is a 100% RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard project. There's 5 distinct areas in which it can be considered renewable. Solar, wind, small hydro, less than 100 megawatts, biogas, which is this, and geothermal. Those are it. Anything else, large hydro is not considered RPS, nuclear isn't considered RPS, just those categories. Within the biogas category, the state legislature has even gone further to tighten down on 3 specific areas: oil refineries, livestock and dairy, and landfills, specifically landfills, and the need to address these issues with regards to methane at those landfills. And it has long been considered a minimum to combust the gas through a flaring system, but much preferred method is to turn that naturally occurring resource into energy, to turn around and make electricity, 100% green electricity that goes right into our RPS. So the notion that this isn't a green project or the legislature wouldn't see it, they absolutely see it. They set the tone. In fact, Their drive to address biogas issues because of the methane emissions and how detrimental they are to the environment is that any of those other categories I talked about, you can import that energy from another location. We can get solar from Arizona. We can get wind from Colorado. We can get geothermal from Reno, Nevada. But in California, the only place you get credit for biogas is if it's generated in California. Has to be generated in California because they want the issue to be addressed here in California, not be importing it for the simple fact of offsetting like some of the others. They want biogas to be addressed here, and that's exactly what we're proposing to do. This project takes what today, some folks speaking talked about just keep doing it the way you're doing it at Grayson. You know, we've shown without question that this is a far superior project. It takes a 50% renewable project and turns it into a 100% renewable project, and it cuts emissions dramatically. I'll have these gentlemen give you the details on that at your leisure. But the fact is, this is a green project. It is an RPS project. It is a 100% renewable project as defined by the state. And this is exactly the place where the legislature has been directing us to go to get away from burning fossil fuels. So I just want to make that really, really clear because there was some back and forth that this wasn't, or maybe it's not the preferred method of some individuals. But the fact of the matter is, and there's no weighted quality in any of these. They don't say, you know, solar is, you have this much solar or this much biogas or this much. Those 5 categories are considered RPS, period. And this is definitely one of those. So if there's any questions on that specific topic, otherwise I'll turn it over to our emissions and EIR consultants and let them work their way through some of the comments that were made.
Yeah, continue on, because we will be peppering you with
absolutely.
questions.
You come back with questions on anything.
Thank you. We've heard quite a bit of comment this evening, notably on a number of environmental factors that the public is concerned with. Air quality, including health risks associated with criteria air pollutant and toxic air contaminant emissions, as well as traffic, noise, fires, earthquakes, wanting an EIR, and really alternatives to be studied. So we want to spend a few minutes just briefly talking through some of that. And do want to note and draw the Commission's attention to the final mitigated negative declaration that includes written responses to comments that were received.
129 at the
Yes, that is correct. And because a lot of those comments focused on similar types of concerns, we prepared some topical responses to address those at a more global or holistic basis. And those are included in the final mitigated negative declaration. We have a topical response 1 that evaluates the relationship between the biogas renewable generation project and the landfill expansion, as well as topical response 2 that is the biogas renewable generation project's relationship to the Grayson repowering project. Topical response 3 is the differences between a mitigated negative declaration and an EIR and the requirements for those, and why the biogas renewable generation project adequately fits into the requirements for a mitigated negative declaration and not an EIR. There are others that go into specific environmental factors, cumulative impacts, air quality, greenhouse gases, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, noise and traffic and transportation, and public noticing, and the location of the project. Those are all included in topical responses 1 through 10. So that includes a lot more information than I can briefly share with you this evening. But we do want to talk about some of those key issues. We did hear a lot of concerns about just air quality, noise, traffic impacts. And I want to note that the analysis in our initial study and mitigated negative declaration quantifies a lot of that. Well, not only do we analyze what that impact could do, we use what is referred to as thresholds of significance. If there is an increase in noise levels, what is that increase? We quantify that in study, but then the next step is how important or how significant would that increase in noise be? So we use adopted thresholds of significance that are typically focused on regulatory standards or other agency standards. A good example would be the South Coast Air Quality Management District that Carl will speak to in a minute. They have established quantified significance thresholds, and that's what we apply the analysis of impacts on to determine whether or not those are considered significant or not, and if they are significant, whether they require mitigation measures or not. Oh, real briefly, I want to talk about fires. You've heard some responses in
I'll
our...
just stop you here for a moment. There was a comment made about the air quality by the doctor that the gas that, or was it PH, PNH?
PAHs. Yes.
That it was at 132, that 9 grams, 9 nanograms versus 132 nanograms. Can you expand on that a little bit? And what is it in conjunction with the biogas generation?
Yes, I can, and I'll probably ask Carl Laney to come up as well. The commenter noted an individual, Stephen Brady, who was a preparer of some of the documentation in the final MND and his experience with PAHs. Stephen Brady is a colleague of mine. We're in the same office. His specialty is assessment and remediation of impacted soils and groundwater. I do not have that in front of me. It's probably his resume in there. I strongly suspect the reference made to Steve Brady's experience with PAHs is directly related to soil and or groundwater remediation and impacts. We did a phase 1 environmental site assessment as part of the environmental analysis for the biogas renewable generation project. That did not result in identifying recognized environmental conditions that warranted further assessment in a phase 2. The reason I bring that up is our project does not include any soil or groundwater remediation at all. The emission sources is my understanding that in the speciation of toxic air contaminants, that PAHs are a part of that. And we look at that from a health risk standpoint. There was a health risk assessment prepared for this project that was conducted in accordance with South Coast Air Quality Management District's protocol and requirements. As my colleague Mr. Laney mentioned, they approved that protocol, and that's exactly what we followed. The results of that health risk assessment indicate that there would be less than significant impacts, again, using a threshold of significance that is based on a numeric value of number of cancer cases and also acute and chronic non-cancer health impacts. Did I say that accurately enough, or would you like to correct anything yet? Okay, thank you. Okay, to go.
Are you done?
Yes.
So you answered my question.
Okay,
go ahead.
Could you ask it one more time in terms of the numbers it was? Because I'm just not familiar with the numbers.
It was 132 nanograms versus 9 nanograms. That even 9 nanograms would generate a huge deal of issue. And apparently this biogen gas generation is going to generate, or at least the inference was that it would be the 132 nanograms.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just not familiar with that data, and if we have that, it would have to come from you, I think. I'm just not familiar with
those. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no, I'm sorry, ma'am. We know how to ask the questions.
And maybe a question for you then would be in terms of our toxic air contaminant emissions and the speciation of all those different components that make up those toxic air contaminants. Are you aware of a specific speciation that we have done for PAHs?
We did include PAHs. Can you come up?
Yes. The health risk assessment that was done for the project does include PAHs. It includes a whole host of known hazardous air pollutants associated with the combustion of landfill gas. And what happens in the health risk assessment is we take a look at the emissions coming out of the stack. We combine that information with meteorological data. We combine it with topographic data. And we take like 5 years worth of meteorological data. And we model where the plume dispersion is going to be. From there, we identify where the peak concentrations of these hazardous pollutants are going to be. We have guidance from the state of California and from the South Coast AQMD what reference exposure levels are known for those compounds. And from there, we identify the health risk. We identify for cancer, and again, PAHs are indeed a source of cancer. We identify for acute health risks. Some PAHs are indeed acute health risks, and we identify for chronic health risks that are not cancer. What we found was that the highest health risks were indeed significantly below the thresholds. The significance threshold for cancer, for example, is 10 in 1 million cancer risk, increase in cancer risk. I believe we were at 0.008, I think. No, not 0.5 in a million.
Okay.
No.
Guys,
And more importantly, though, what I want to point out is, although we do an analysis that spans well beyond anything you see on the map up there, what we identified in the body of the report, excuse me, is the points of highest exposure. Those points of highest exposure are right at the facility boundary. If you take a look at the facility, it reminds me a lot of Liberty Coin. And if you look at the chin of the Liberty Coin, that's basically where the highest cancer risk is and the highest health risks. The dispersion tends to go that direction on both a 1 hour and an annual basis. What we know from the air dispersion model, though, is as you get farther and farther away, the concentrations of pollutants drop off significantly, as do the health risks associated with the project. So just know that what you see in the body of the report is the worst, highest concentration and highest health risks. Those happen to be at the fence line. However, the appendices of the report actually show more detailed data going out to the other receptor locations farther away, which would include the neighborhoods that were discussed here today, and it would include the park on the west side of the facility. But again, the dispersion tends not to be going in that direction. It's much lower on that side.
And these are below significant level, your findings.
All of our findings are below significance, and I could talk with you. We've spoken a little bit about the health risk assessment, how we actually model those impacts. We don't model increases, by the way. We model the totality of a project.
So let me stop you and ask you another, and I got to speed this thing up because we don't have, all night. Assuming if there was an EIR, the findings about the health concerns would not have changed. That report would have shown the same thing, wouldn't that?
Speaking for the for the air quality analysis, we do not differentiate between an EIR or a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration as far as how robust our analysis is. And that's because we do it also it's also driven by the South Coast permitting process. We roll everything into one to make sure that we're also meeting the standards of the South Coast permitting program.
So the approach, the methodology would not have been any different?
That is correct.
All right. Steve, maybe you can answer this. There was a comment made that the 120 watt versus the 50 watt, or if it's over 50 watt, if it's over 50 watt, then you need to get a different set of permits and so forth. And this is a run around, a crab-wise.
Right. The individual indicated that was the reason we split the projects, was because if we had combined the two together, we would have had to go through a different permitting process. But the intent was to develop a separate project. It's a 12 megawatt project as opposed to what the gentleman had indicated also. This is a 12 megawatt project. I can have Carl Hossie tell you how that came about. It's a 12 megawatt project. But yeah, there is a threshold that it goes to another agency. That agency's already looked at this from a preliminary basis, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but the AQMD automatically also sends data to them as well. So they get to view this in looking at both projects. So yeah, that's not what we're here. We're here to
So this was not to avoid another regulatory or permitting.
No.
That's what your assertion is.
Yes.
Mr. Zurn, while you're up there, I think one of the questions that I asked was that one of the speaker challenged the efficiency of the system or the capacity of the system, 12 megawatt versus 1 megawatt. And when you really look at that, you know, when you do a return on investment analysis and all that, it makes a, you know, if you only get 1 megawatt out of that power plant, it'll take you forever to pay that off.
Correct.
And then also, you know, having that, you know, it raises a suspicion. Having the gas line attached to the system, then are you maybe contemplating, if you don't get that 12 megawatt, is to actually supplement it with gas to achieve this? But anyways, the first question is that, is it really truly 12 megawatt? Do you really have the source from this
Yes.
landfill gas?
Yes. I'm not sure what the gentleman's background is, but we've been burning landfill gas for 28 years. We run a power plant. We kind of know what our business is. This is a 12 megawatt plant. We certainly wouldn't build a 1 megawatt plant. I'll give you an example. It's called parasitic load. Parasitic load is the amount of electricity it takes to actually operate the equipment that you're using to generate the electricity. There's no way we would operate equipment that couldn't even meet parasitic load. And the other thing is, we would find another alternative to look for energy in another place. 12 megawatts, as we had indicated, increases the amount of electricity we've been producing by commingling it at the Grayson power plant. But the bottom line is, it's 12 megawatts. And that's what we sent in to be permitted. You don't usually go through a permitting process where you ask for more than you can actually produce. There's no way we would have gone after a project like that. And you make a great point about the return on investment and the ability to sell electricity to close that investment. There's absolutely no way we would have pursued this project.
So then, to follow on Commissioner Lee's look at what was said, it is not 90% natural gas and 10% methane, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
There was conversation about an alternative way of handling the gas by selling it to SoCal Gas. Could you? Sure.
I'm not sure what staff they talk to, because we have quite a ongoing dialogue with the Southern California Gas Company, and they're a bit unique, because keep in mind, that's Sempra Energy who owns them. They also own one of the largest electric utilities in California and the country. That's San Diego Gas and Electric. So they have an interest in how these projects, they're required to meet the renewable portfolio standard as well. So the way the speaker had, and the man he was speaking for has said before, we just sell the gas off. We offload the gas for some amount of money. Well, we're an electric utility. We want to generate green electricity. We need to increase our portfolio. We want to increase our portfolio. You see it at 47%. This project will put us 6 to 8% higher. We want to keep going. It's very possible the state will mandate 100%, either 100% renewable or 100% renewable carbon-free combination. So it's in our best interest to keep pushing hard for more and more clean energy projects. So we would not want to offload the gas and sell it to somebody.
But is that a possibility?
Today,
have you looked into it?
We did. We looked at it, upgrading the gas to pipeline quality, which is, the gas company won't just take our gas and put it in the pipeline. Our gas is extremely poor quality. The cost the cost didn't compare. It was too costly for us to do it. The gas company's gas specs at the time were actually, in my opinion, even probably more stringent than their own gas quality. And to clean that up, to even attempt to sell it, and then the whole question of getting the renewable credit for it was still out there. We didn't have that. This way, we take the gas as it is, we create green electricity, and we get 100% credit for it.
I have one more.
Please, excuse me.
Mr. Zurn, one of the other speakers also mentioned, you know, in the light of speaking about this alternatives of liquefaction of this gas. Have you looked into that?
No, we did not look into liquefying this gas, because, again, you have to upgrade it to a certain quality before you could liquefy it to put it into use. It's a really poor quality gas. Again, I say that, you know, if you were able to control the content of what creates the gas, you can create a richer gas that then gives you the opportunity to potentially put it into a transportation type setting or another setting. Give you an example. You heard a lot about this anaerobic digestion process. There are people or there's agencies in other locations that are taking anaerobic digestion projects and using that gas as a vehicle fuel. But they control the waste that goes in to create the fuel. So it is much higher, sometimes as much as 2.5 times the methane content, and also much cleaner. So it's much easier to convert into the liquid. Again, the constraints because of the quality of the gas.
I have no problem understanding and also agreeing with you that what you're proposing is an improvement over current situation, and you have stated to that fact. But the question kept coming up, and that is that have you looked at any other viable alternatives, and have you?
We looked at cleaning. This is Les Toth. He'll come up and talk. We looked at again the ability to clean the gas up. During our processing, I heard the turbine mentioned, and we looked at turbines. In fact, a company that bid on our equipment was a turbine manufacturer. So we've looked at quite a few alternatives. And prior to us even embarking down this road, we looked at everything from, would we be able to continue to burn it at Grayson? Is there another option that gets us, like you said, vehicle quality gas? Do we do it in an engine? Do we do it in a turbine? All those things we looked at as we vetted through this. But I'll let Les talk a little bit.
My name is Les Toth. I'm an engineer working for Steve. I personally have looked at other technologies to use. For example, cleaning up this gas to pipeline quality to sell to the gas company. There is no commercially available technology to do that. This is not a digester. A digester can be cleaned up, and it's being done all over California to pipeline quality gas and to use in vehicle fuel. There's one in Paris, California. I have seen the facility. It's a digester. Landfill gas is different. The major difference is landfill gas has 30% nitrogen in it. Our gas has 4 or 5% oxygen. In order to bring it up to pipeline quality, you have to remove all of that stuff from it. And there's no technology today available to buy to do that. Yes, universities are doing it. Yes, there's experiments out there, but this is a city. City can't do that, in my opinion. You don't want to do an experiment. You want something that works. I also want to address the 1 to 10 megawatt issue, or 12 megawatt issue. If you do the mathematics, and the gentleman was doing it the right way, you take 6,000 SCFM gas, which is what we have approximately. You take 30% methane. You multiply that by the heating value of methane, then you get so many BTUs. You divide that by the efficiency of the engines. These engines are approximately 8,000 BTUs per kilowatt hour. So it takes 8,000 BTUs of gas to make a kilowatt. You do that math, pretty close to 12. Just if you want to do that, you could do it. Or I'll do it for you on the blackboard.
No.
Okay. Capstone, there are several small 1 megawatt gas turbine manufacturers that make these special high RPM machines. Yes, Capstone is one, Ingersoll Rand is another. There are several other ones. These machines cannot burn landfill gas. Landfill gas is dirty. We have no technology to clean up that gas to work in these small turbines. 15,000 RPM, very delicate seals, and there's no way to clean up that gas, so these turbines will last more than a month.
Steve, Los Angeles County traffic, the gentleman from LA County traffic.
Yes, let me have Mike, because we
had an issue.
We did address that.
Yeah, thank you. My recollection was the concern was related to traffic and particularly cumulative issues, and not looking at our project's contribution to traffic from, say, the landfill expansion anaerobic, the Green Waste Anaerobic Digestion Project, as well as the Grayson Project. So we did evaluate potential cumulative traffic impacts as part of our mitigated negative declaration. For the Green Waste Digester Project, while we recognize there is very limited information available right now, just because it's not a structured project at this point, we don't have any details of it. But our assumption was that the green waste, and this is a realistic assumption or fact, the green waste that would be used for the digester is green waste that is already going into the landfill. So it would be a diversion of green waste from the landfill into the digester to make the gas for beneficial reuse. So those truck trips associated with delivering the green waste to the landfill are going to be the same trucks that would deliver the green waste for anaerobic digestion. So we don't see that specific project and our project with it having a considerable contribution to any cumulative traffic impact from that project. When you look at the Grayson Repowering Project and the separation of distance in excess of 5 miles and looking at the roadway network that vehicle trips would be using for each project, they're separate and there is no overlap in the same roadways or intersections that would be impacted. So that comes out. The third one is the landfill expansion EIR and a substantial increase in truck traffic that would occur as a result of the landfill expansion. Well, notably in the landfill expansion EIR, they determined that that project would have a potentially significant traffic impact, but they mitigated it to a less than significant level by proposing a substantial number of intersection improvements for potentially affected roadways that would substantially improve the existing levels of service. When you added the landfill expansion truck trips to that, it would be a much lower impact because the improvements they were making was going to increase the circulation. So when you look at that aspect of it, plus our trips, if they were to overlap in time and space, our project would not have a substantial contribution to a cumulative impact because of the improvement in the roadway network that the project would use as a result of the landfill expansion EIR being implemented, if it is implemented.
There was conversations about earthquake and liquefaction. Who's going to be able to respond intelligently to me on that? Is that something that we have to be really concerned as far as the landfill?
No. For liquefaction, no. The project site is on solid rock, essentially. For earthquakes...
Okay, would you please give the gentleman the courtesy to respond to my question? Go ahead, sir.
So we don't foresee liquefaction as being a big potential impact for this project based on the site conditions. Earthquakes, there are earthquakes nearby, and I think the Verdugo Fault was mentioned as the nearest one, 0.3 miles away. Could there be some fault rupture and ground shaking that could impact the project? Possibly so. These are hazards that exist across all of Southern California. This is something that we address all the time, and we address it typically through building code compliance. There is the California Building Code that has all sorts of seismic design requirements for the sole purpose of either avoiding or minimizing damage as a result of an earthquake. This project is going to be following all of those California Building Code design requirements, including for seismic. And just want to note that this project is not proposing to build, say, habitable structures over a fault or in close proximity. And quite frankly, the existing operations that are occurring there are subject to the same risk right now.
You're very confident about, mentioning this project is sitting on a solid rock. Do you have geological survey report?
Yes, we did a geotechnical evaluation as part of the design and as well as the environmental impact analysis as well, and that is an attachment to that mitigated negative declaration.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Feel free to answer anything that you heard tonight.
Okay, I did want to jump back to fires real quick. You've heard a lot of concern about it. We opened up in our presentation with some information about why we believe that the project would have a low fire risk, even though it's in a high fire hazard area, notably for the types of materials that we're dealing with and or the pressures that we're dealing with, as well as the low flammability of the landfill gas. And that really shows in the suppression system of if there were a fire, that this project adopts all of the necessary requirements for responding to a fire, including the fire suppression tank with the water, including access roads for the fire department and meeting the required widths, and really that design basis of fire prevention or suppression being vetted and approved by the city's fire department. I also want to note, and failed to mention it in our introduction briefing, that the actual engines themselves that are combusting the landfill gas in a potential ignition source, those are in enclosures, fully enclosed. And part of the fire suppression system includes an inert gas suppression system that if there were a fire in the engine and in the enclosure, it automatically suppresses that fire by putting in an inert gas. So that is an additional fire prevention component that I just did not mention before, but is an important component of the project.
I had a question. Please go ahead. My colleagues have asked a number of questions which address, let's say, the trees. I want to talk about the forest. The one concern that I've heard over and over again, the one term that was used many times, EIR. Can you explain to me, anyone can answer this question, why did we not do an EIR? How much time would it have cost us? I understand that technically we went around it. There's technicalities that allowed us to not have an EIR. Why didn't we do it? How much would it have cost us in terms of money and in terms of time?
I would have to look at that in more detail, but I will give you a ballpark estimate. I think if we had chose to do an EIR, we were probably adding maybe 4 months, 6 months onto the time frame at a cost of anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000 additional level of effort to address that in an EIR.
Given that the level of knowledge that I see and competence that I hear, couldn't the information that you have now be incorporated into an EIR with some other analyses and studies such that we have one ultimately?
Yes, if we went forward and prepared an environmental impact report, much of the existing environmental analysis included in the initial study mitigated negative declaration would be used in support of that environmental impact report process. The reason that we did not do an environmental impact report was the results of the initial study that concluded that there would be no potentially significant impacts. And really, one of the purposes of an EIR, and you've heard it today, is a request to evaluate alternatives. Well, the importance of evaluating alternatives in an EIR, or the sole purpose of it, is to identify and evaluate alternatives to a proposed project that would either avoid or substantially reduce potential environmental impacts. We don't have that scenario in this case. There are no potentially significant impacts that need to be reduced or would be reduced through any alternative, whether it was evaluated and implemented, because we just don't have that level of impact that triggers that level of analysis.
So I want to do a follow-up question, and this, I think, might better suit you to answer, Mr. Zurn, and that is, obviously, from the numbers, and then from the procedure point, you made your point. But a lot of the comments that we heard today, the people are asking for just to even, with the full EIR, to re-verify, to, really validate your points. So I'm asking you if spending this additional funds and 4 or 5 months added to this, does that have any type of a impact on your program that could negatively affect our city?
Well, let me start by saying that it was not time or money that drove the decision. It's what Mike said, is when the initial impact came in, and it's, what are we able to do to accomplish our goals? This is what we were able to do to accomplish that. To do something above and beyond that, it isn't required, and then in turn, spending more money, and time isn't as big of a deal. We could have worked it in. It seems, a bit of a waste, quite frankly. If we're getting our objective met based on what the initial impact report indicated, and that's what drove our decision. You can certainly study things and study things and study things, but you know, the sense that there are some folks who don't like the project for whatever reason, and that additional study will somehow delay the project or maybe eliminate the project. You know, at the end of the day, this is a project that's quite a bit different from the Grayson project in that we have to deal with this. We don't have a choice. We have to deal with this. And what we're proposing is the absolute cleanest, best way to do that. We are mitigating the hazard that exists at the landfill that we're required by law to mitigate. We're converting that naturally occurring, potentially harmful constituent that comes out of the landfill into renewable electricity.
Mr. Zurn, I have no problems with that. I agree with you. This is one of the solutions. I guess I'll redirect my question. You heard a lot of the speakers today. Maybe you did not have opportunity to, well, you may have heard something new that may have come out. Is there something from today's meeting that will persuade otherwise?
No, sir.
There was a question, I'm going to go for the trees, Steel.
Yes, sir.
There was a question about staffing and in emergency instances. How are you going to be able to get your staffing up there, and how long, and which route is it going to be? Is it going to be Glen Oaks? Is it going to Figueroa? And how do you respond to that? I understand the redundancy, the switches, this and that, but in case of an earthquake, how do we address that?
Well, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we have a lot of equipment that operates 24/7, 365. We have staff up that will be there on a daily basis to monitor, and then we have a variety of fail-safes that are included. You heard some of them. We've got enclosed buildings with fire extinguisher systems. We've got safety alarms. We have staff in Glendale that work 24/7, 365. GWP has 24/7, 365 staff. Our dispatch office is one. That's where there are men in there watching the electric system and the generation system on a constant basis. Their ability to make a call out to get somebody here in the event of emergency is very quick. Just like if we had a substation or a water pump station or any other one of our facilities that would have a problem in the middle of the night where it's not manned or has staff 24/7. And this would be one of those. The staff would be highly trained. Again, we know how to run power generating facilities. This one's a little different than Grayson, and maybe a little different than the existing gas to energy project. But we know what we're doing, and we will train our staff to be able to handle those. You mentioned earthquake. When there's an earthquake, sir, it is all hands on deck. Everybody gets called out. We're worried about, we will try to, as best we can, ensure the electricity stays on. Some systems we'll have to cut off and let go, but a lot of times we're worried about the individual health and safety of our residents, because you get an earthquake of any magnitude that's going to cause damage at the landfill. I guarantee you it's going to cause damage to many of these people's homes. And the first and foremost is their safety and getting to them and making sure they're okay. The gas collection system has a number of shutoffs in it, and we'll have people up there looking at it. But I just don't see that as a concern. We incorporate it like we do many of our other infrastructure systems.
So there was a comment made that the budget for this generators at SCHOLL really is built into Grayson, as opposed to what your assertion was at the beginning, that this is a standalone project and it's going to cost about $30 million, and you're going to recoup the money back, or the city is going to recoup the money back in 7 years.
Correct.
Is this budgeted in Grayson repowering, or is it a standalone? Which one is it?
We actually have not done any financial mechanism for Grayson. So the proposal is that it will be a bond issue, and none of that has been before council for approval at this point. Our thought was that we could, at the same time we issued bond debt for Grayson, we could do it for this project as well. As time has gone on, and money situations and interest rates and so forth, our decision is that we would cash flow this project. So this would come out of our existing budget reserves.
And that's not going to change.
It's not going to change. And I don't know where just to follow up, I heard 14 or 15. The project's been split in that we said it's about 14 to 15 for the equipment and about 14 to 15 for the construction. But at the end of the day, we were at that 30 to 35.
So there was a comment made that the noise from the generators would be equivalent to 1,000 cars, not Subarus, but 1,000 cars revving. Talk to us about the noise.
Our project does not include 1,000 vehicles, so that is just something we did not model. So
Generators. The comparison.
Yeah.
The engines.
So we modeled the noise levels associated with operation of the generators, and that analysis shows that it has a very low contribution to the existing noise environment, particularly near the sensitive receptors. But in terms of equating that noise level from the generators to how many vehicles that would be, I couldn't tell you.
Are there toxins leaching, flowing underneath people's homes?
There is what is called, is percolation as water, primarily rainwater, percolates through the landfill to the bottom. You do get what was at one time called leachate. I think they have it now. They're a rather more scientific name for it. I'll call it leachate because I'm an old timer, and that's what we called it. It can find its way to the bottom, but there are equipment in place and safety measures in place to collect that. We have barriers that have been installed. The water is caught at the barrier and then pumped into the sewer system.
Well, that would not have increased with this biogas generation.
No.
That one has nothing to do with the...
That's correct. What would increase it for us more than anything would be an increase in rainfall. That would be it. That's, we put dust control on the landfill. That's part of our requirement. So we do have artificial or man-made watering of the facility while it's operating to keep the dust down. But the only thing that would increase that kind of percolation would be more rainfall. But this project would not affect that.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Yes, thank you. Just want to finish up on noise, just talking about it. Did want to address the comments on construction noise as well. The project, construction would only occur during daytime hours, would not occur on Sundays or holidays or during the night, which is consistent with City of Glendale's noise ordinance. The construction activities are occurring in an active landfill where there is active grading operations on a daily basis. The noise sources associated with our proposed project in terms of construction does involve grading, so very similar noise sources. We do not include any pile driving or loud impact-related noise in construction, nor anything that would really substantially increase vibration that would have the potential to affect people. So in consistency with the existing noise operations, as well as the time frame, we concluded that the construction noise would be less than significant as well. Do want to ask Mr. Laney to come up and just address air quality real quick, and then I can probably wrap it up.
Real quick.
Okay. I think we may have touched on some of these items before. There was one concern that the project was being scheduled as to manipulate the baselines that were being used for CEQA or for permitting. I've considered this, and I just don't see any material impact on permitting. It would not change the significance determination of this project or any project. It would not disqualify us for offsets, and I want to remind you that our analysis is not based upon an increase in emissions from a baseline. Our detailed analysis are based upon the entire emissions profile of the new facility. We already talked about the health risk assessment, and that it did include some of the compounds that were brought up for concern, and that the report only shows the most significant impacts, which are at the project fence line, not at the inhabited areas. There were also a lot of concerns about offsets themselves. First and foremost, offsets are only one of many demonstrations that have to be made for the sake of receiving permits from South Coast. But offsets are available. They are not dependent upon the need for power in this case. The reference to having to demonstrate a need for electricity is not applicable to this project. It is applicable to other projects, but it is not applicable to this, what's considered an essential public service project. Just want to confirm that, yes, those credits are available. South Coast has confirmed through its permitting process with us that, yes, we qualify for the priority reserve credits, and yes, they are setting them aside for us. If, in fact, the concerns about the availability of credits was legitimate or were legitimate, then no harm, no foul, because South Coast wouldn't issue the permit. But in this case, South Coast has indeed confirmed eligibility and availability.
Carl's just has reminded me, one of the speakers had talked about the potential of an alternative project where we could get funding through AQMD. Just a note, this project has the potential to get funding through AQMD as they are promoting the avoidance of flaring.
In speaking to that, South Coast does have an outstanding RFP for emission reduction projects, and they have specifically cited the transition of flaring landfill gas to power generating systems as eligible projects. And they do give credit also for recognition that this particular project, not only is it a reduction in NOx emissions, it is one of the few landfill projects that would have emission control systems that would actually reduce hazardous pollutants. Oh. The whole thing? South Coast, in South Coast's request for proposals for funding, they do specifically mention eligibility of conversion of flare operations or uncontrolled emission operations to power generation systems. And in our case, we would receive consideration not only for the NOx emission reductions for renewable energy. This is one of the few projects in the state right now that has emission control systems on the internal combustion engine that actually reduces the hazardous air pollutants that have the impact on the health risk assessment that you have seen.
Thank you. Okay.
Do you bear with me for another 2 minutes?
No.
Okay.
No.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Mrs. Mrs. Van Meiden, at this moment, do we close the public hearing portion of it and start deliberating, or do we just leave it open just in case if we have additional questions?
Mr. Chair, members of the agency, what I think that you might want to consider is to the extent that any comments on the MND have not been adequately responded to, that the opportunity be provided, although briefly, to either point to where that information is within the document, or to indicate, to allow the consultants to provide that information, because the approval or denial of the MND is dependent on the information that's in the record. So it's based on the substantial evidence. So I don't know if there's any additional information that's necessary to put in the record, but that's something that you might consider. And then at that point, you can close the public hearing and commence your deliberations. Staff is available to answer any additional questions if at that point some new information arises during your deliberations. You're certainly welcome to reopen the public hearing should that be necessary.
Sure. So, commissioners, should we close the public hearing and start deliberation?
I'm fine closing it.
So we will close it and the deliberation starts. Mr. Manukian or Mr. Lee?
I'll go.
You go.
Yeah. You know, after so long deliberations from the speakers and then rebuttal presentation, I am convinced that this is one of the viable solution. And that the city staff has looked at other alternatives as well. And Mr. Zurn also is confident about his decision with the consultants' recommendations and with the staff recommendation. And what I like to, and you know, from this long deliberation, I also developed confidence in the system as well. However, I asked the question whether or not the delay in the project would have a detrimental impact on the program, and your answer was no. So sometimes in our lives, we know what we're doing, we are sure of what we're doing, but at times we need to take extra step to make sure, and also these are taxpayers, our neighbors, that who have some concerns that you've obviously responded, tried to reach out and answered, and yet from tonight's speakers that we find those are not, you know, you've done your best to address those problems, but what I see is that it really hasn't been addressed. So then why not take that extra time to go through EIR, and what it'll do is that, you know, the process will not change, the procedure will not change, then either just re-verify and then validate the points you're making and the confidence that you have in the system. So the direction I'm going is that I do like to see what some of the other viable alternatives there could be available besides our staff looking into it. And some of the concerns, maybe, you know, if it turns out that all the same findings come up, then, you know, our rest easy, sleep better, and maybe our constituents will sleep easier too. So that's the direction I'm going.
Mr. Chairman, can I go?
Of course, you may.
I've been a planning commissioner, I want to say, for 10 years now. I've never encountered a more prepared, professional, and competent application, ever. It was almost like every question that we answered, you could answer it right off the, every question that we asked could be answered right off the top of your head with references. And I appreciate that. And frankly, if I was the king of Glendale, I would approve this. I would say, yes, go ahead and do it. Because everything seems to be exactly what it needs to be. But I think we have reached a moment that we have to finally care to a certain extent about the trust that the residents of the city have in their government. The commission system of the city of Glendale is one of the best examples of public participation in the daily running of their city. And unless we, at a certain point, give in to the public outcry of a higher standard, we are not reaching, we are not serving the goal, the purpose. Now, mind you, and I don't mean to make anybody angry, but so many of the statements that were made at the lectern today were demonstrably false, on their face. But they were made and repeated. And not everything is semantics. Words matter. Words matter, so you can't disregard what somebody says because just by a throwaway statement of, oh, that's just semantics. No, it's not. An expansion is an expansion. But in any event, at the end of the day, the residents matter more than the commissioners. The residents matter more than the city staff, with all due respect. And because of that, Mr. Chairman, I would vote to deny the mitigated negative declaration. And I would ask that we seriously consider doing an EIR to provide the residents with that higher level of scrutiny that they seem to be wanting. Thank you very much.
And Chair, Commissioner just asked, you know, for I mean, here we're deciding on the MND and then also the CUP, but then also made a suggestion, can this body, City Attorney, to make that recommendation to go for the EIR?
You certainly can. The project's also appealable to the city council if you deny the project.
Yeah, so this is not the last stop, by
Yeah.
the way, right? Okay, so let me just tell you what my thoughts are. I think a little bit differently from my commissioners. By the way, I appreciate, and I mean this sincerely from the bottom of my heart, I think everybody will share the same sentiment here on the dais. For you to have participated, for you to have been present, and for you to have made sure that you are heard, whether it was through a coalition or individually. We are not insensitive to the causes of your angst. By no means. Where I am, where I think differently from my fellow commissioners is that in front of me is a document, thousands of pages, which, by the way, I spent a lot of time reading and going through, and I could not punch holes in it. And for that reason, I believe that the MND, the way that it's been prepared, that even having gone beyond the scope of a normal MND, it's a document that is valid. It's a document that needs to be considered very seriously. I want to go back to CEQA and Southern California AQMD. Folks, these guidelines are the toughest guidelines when it comes to environmental issues. I mean, there can't be any tougher organizations that deal with environmental issues. And you have something that falls well within the CEQA guidelines, and you have, I mean, by its own statement, that prior to initiating, they have submitted the protocol to AQMD, and AQMD has approved the protocol. And that's how they have chosen to do what they have done. Interestingly, when we talk about EIR versus CEQA, and this is why I wanted for Mrs. Van Meiden to get this out of the way at the beginning when I talked about you know, this legal standard of fair argument, was just that. Because the difference in majority of the stuff that you have in this document, 1,000-page document that you have, versus the EIR is just going to be the alternative uses. Your air quality discussion is not going to change. Your earthquake hazard discussion is not going to change. All of these are going to be incorporated in your EIR. Now, most of the stuff, if we want to stop Shoal Canyon, an asset that this city has had since 1958, it's a totally different story. But if we want to make sure that Shoal Canyon works, but works perfectly, it's altogether a different story. An alternative use for Shoal Canyon would be what? Close the dump. You have 200,000 people that live in this city, with all due respect. 200,000 people, the population of the city of Glendale, depends on this asset that city of Glendale has. Again, I'm not being insensitive to you folks living around it. There is a lot of stuff around where I live that I don't like. But that's what a community is. Because I don't believe there will be anybody here that would say, no, 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 don't use or don't create renewable energy so long as it's not done around Shoal Canyon, but it's done at Grayson. I believe everybody would agree with it. The reason why I do not, and I can make the findings, but by the way, I mean, seriously, when I look at the findings, the conditional use findings, I mean, in all honesty, it's incapable of being misunderstood. every single finding. We have to make these findings in order for us to approve the mitigated negative declaration and the conditional use permit. It's incapable of being misunderstood. It's all black and white. It's in there. When you juxtapose it against the MND, you will see that all of this stuff is going to be there. Again, as far as EIR is concerned, everything that you've heard today, you will be hearing in the EIR. Air quality will not change. Well, because I've asked the question, ma'am, we've listened to you and I've appreciated your position. Now it's that deliberation time. Whether you like it or not, you either listen and you then chalk it off or you say no. That's all there is to it. So when it comes to EIR, it's very simple. The only thing that will change this report in an EIR, the majority of the report in the EIR, is the alternative uses. Nothing else. With that, we've heard, and I'm ready to entertain a motion. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We're done with the public hearing. Well, you just got two voices that are,
But with all due respect, I felt that the consultants did not answer your questions adequately. In two respects. One,
Ma'am, you have one.
Please take your seat. On behalf of Eagle Rock constituents.
Chairman Historian,
Chairman?
I just want to confirm that all materials received at the hearings so far, everything that's been received tonight and today, earlier, everything that's on the hearing, on the dais that's available for public comment, all of that is being moved into the public record.
Except that comment.
Mr. Chairman, I hereby move that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of current record relative to the conditional use permit number 1804023 and special recreation review number 1804021, located at 3001 Shoal Canyon Road, and after having conducted a hearing on said matter, the Planning Commission hereby continues the project without further notice to the next regularly scheduled meeting of April 4th, 2018, and direct staff to come back with a motion and finding of denial.
Second.
Ms. Stogler, roll call.
We have a motion and second. Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Manukian?
Aye.
Chairperson Historian?
No.
Motion carries.
Do we need to take action on the CUP as well?
No, that was a CUP, wasn't it? So we
That was
need,
the CUP.
Yeah, we
Yes.
need the
What about
MND.
the
Yeah.
MND?
The environmental?
Yeah,
There is a resolution before
Yeah,
you, so
so-
I would recommend that you vote on that.
yeah, that needs to be voted.
So you need to do that.
Another one, yeah. Is this where we can include EIR comment in there? Yeah. So once you reject the MND and then instruct.
Where is this?
It would be a motion to approve or disapprove the environmental resolution.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, as Ms. Stotler just suggested, you could move whether to approve or disapprove the adoption of the MND that's before you tonight.
Yes. Yeah.
Orally.
Oh, there wasn't one for this, so not fine. Okay.
There was a resolution prepared, but that was for, I believe, approval of the MND.
Yes.
Right. So you can make the similar motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we deny the development and operation of a 12-megawatt power generation facility located at 3001 Shoal Canyon Road, Glendale, California. Vehicular access via 7721 North Figueroa Street, Los Angeles, California, 90041.
It's the you're making, I'm just correcting, are you making a motion to not adopt the mitigative negative declaration and mitigation monitoring program prepared for that project, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
First paragraph?
Yes. So instead of approving, you're making a motion to not approve, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I hereby move that we not adopt a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation and monitoring program related thereto prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act for the project located at 3001 Shoal Canyon Road, Glendale, California. Vehicular access via 7721 North Figueroa Street, Los Angeles, California, 90041.
Commissioner Munoz, can you add?
And I hereby also move that we recommend that the city staff prepare an EIR for this matter.
Impact.
Environmental impact report.
And that's part of the same motion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
Commissioner Manukian?
Aye.
Chairperson Historian?
No.
All right. Motion carries.
So congratulations. Thank you very much for coming. Are there any, folks, we're still in session. So, I mean, you can leave, but why don't we take another 2-minute?
No.
Okay. Do whatever you need to do. You deserve to be happy right now. All right. Are there any community development department updates?
We have no reports.
Any comments from the commissioners?
No, sir.
Adjournment.